Her husband vanished in the night, taking their savings, their wagon, and every shred of hope. Nora Allen woke to find herself alone on the Montana frontier with 6 hungry children, no money, and winter closing in. The letter he left was brief. "I can't do this anymore." She had 2 choices: watch her family starve, or accept help from a stranger who would change everything. This is the story of a woman who lost everything, and the cowboy who said 3 words that saved them all: "Let me help." Stay until the end to see how love rewrote their destiny, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The Montana sun rose blood red over the Allen homestead on the morning Nora's world fell apart. She'd woken before dawn, as always, her body moving through the familiar motions even before her mind fully surfaced from sleep. The cabin was cold. It was always cold in these early hours, even in late summer. She'd wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and padded barefoot across the rough wooden floor to stir the embers in the stove, adding kindling with practiced efficiency. It wasn't until she turned to fill the kettle that she noticed the silence. Not the peaceful quiet of early morning, but something else. Something wrong. The kind of silence that screams. Thomas's boots were gone from beside the door. His coat, usually hung on the peg above them, had vanished. The chair where he always left his hat sat empty. Nora's hand stilled on the kettle. Her heart began a slow, heavy thud against her ribs. "Thomas?" Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. No answer. She set the kettle down with trembling hands and moved through the small cabin, her bare feet silent on the floorboards. The children were still asleep, 6 small bodies bundled in the loft above, their breathing soft and even. Eva, her eldest at 10, had one arm thrown over 7-year-old James. The twins, Ruth and Rebecca, were tangled together as always, their identical faces peaceful in sleep. 5-year-old Samuel clutched his threadbare blanket, and little Levi, barely 3, was curled like a comma at the edge of the shared mattress. Thomas wasn't with them. He wasn't in the cabin. Nora's breath came faster now. She grabbed her shawl and stepped outside into the gray pre-dawn light. The wagon was gone. Their only wagon. The one Thomas had spent 3 months building from salvaged wood and sheer determination. The wagon they needed to get to town, to carry water from the creek in dry spells, to transport anything heavier than what she could carry on her back. Gone. Nora ran to the small lean-to where they kept their few supplies. Her hands shook as she pushed open the door. Empty. The sacks of flour and cornmeal they'd carefully rationed, gone. The salt pork hanging from the rafters, gone. The jar where they kept their savings, every penny earned from Thomas's occasional work on neighboring ranches, gone. Everything. He'd taken everything. Nora stood in the empty lean-to, her breathing ragged, her mind refusing to accept what her eyes were seeing. This couldn't be happening. Thomas wouldn't. He couldn't. Then she saw it. A piece of paper weighted down by a small stone on the workbench. Her hand shook so badly she could barely unfold it. The handwriting was Thomas's, rough, angular, written in haste. "Nora, I can't do this anymore. 6 children is too many mouths. This life is killing me. I'm going to California where a man can make something of himself. Don't try to follow. Don't try to find me. You're resourceful. You'll figure something out. You always do. T." The paper slipped from Nora's fingers and drifted to the dirt floor. She stood there, frozen, as the sun crept higher, and the world around her came alive with morning sounds. Birds calling, wind rustling through the dry grass, the distant lowing of a neighbor's cattle. He was gone. Thomas Allen, her husband of 11 years, the father of her 6 children, had abandoned them in the middle of the Montana Territory with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a cabin that leaked when it rained. Nora's legs gave out. She sank to her knees on the hard-packed earth, her shawl falling from her shoulders. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but kneel there in the empty lean-to while the full weight of her situation crashed down on her like a physical blow. No wagon, no supplies, no money, no way to get to town, 15 miles on foot with 6 small children. No way to buy food even if she could get there. No way to... "Mama?" Eva's voice, small and uncertain, cut through the roaring in Nora's ears. She looked up to see her eldest daughter standing in the doorway of the lean-to, still in her nightgown, her brown hair tangled from sleep. The morning light behind her made her look impossibly young, impossibly fragile. "Mama, why are you on the ground? Where's Papa?" Nora forced herself to stand. Her legs shook, but she locked her knees and managed to stay upright. She brushed the dirt from her skirt with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "Papa!" The lie stuck in her throat. She swallowed hard and tried again. "Papa had to go away for a while." "Where did he go?" To find work." Eva's dark eyes, so like Nora's own, searched her mother's face with an intensity that made Nora want to look away. Even at 10 years old, Eva was too perceptive, too smart. She could always tell when Nora was lying. "When is he coming back?" The simple question nearly broke her. "I don't know, sweetheart." Eva looked past her mother into the empty lean-to. Nora watched as her daughter's eyes widened, taking in the bare rafters, the missing supplies, the wagon that should have been there but wasn't. "Mama, Eva." Nora's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. She softened it with effort. "Go wake your brothers and sisters. We need to take stock of what we have." "But the food." "Eva, please." Something in her tone must have gotten through because Eva nodded slowly and turned back toward the cabin. Nora watched her go, her small shoulders squared with a responsibility no 10-year-old should have to carry. The moment Eva disappeared inside, Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She pressed her fist against her mouth, biting down hard on her knuckles to keep from screaming. She wanted to rage. She wanted to cry. She wanted to saddle Thomas's horse, except he'd taken that too, she realized, with a fresh wave of despair, and chase him down and demand to know how he could do this. How he could leave his children, how he could look at their faces every day for years and still find it in himself to walk away. But she couldn't afford rage, couldn't afford tears, couldn't afford the luxury of falling apart. 6 children were depending on her. Nora straightened her spine, pulled her shawl back around her shoulders, and walked back to the cabin on legs that felt like water. Inside, the children were stirring. Eva had woken them as instructed, and they sat on the edge of their shared mattress in various states of sleepy confusion. James was rubbing his eyes with his fists. The twins leaned against each other, Ruth's thumb in her mouth, a habit she'd almost broken but returned to when she was anxious. Samuel clutched his blanket and stared at Nora with wide, worried eyes. Little Levi was still half asleep, his head on Eva's shoulder. 6 faces, 6 souls. 6 reasons to keep breathing, keep moving, keep fighting. "Children," Nora said, and was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "We need to talk." The next 3 days were the longest of Nora's life. She'd spent the first day taking inventory of what little they had left. Thomas had been thorough. He'd taken every scrap of food that could be easily transported, all their saved money, anything of value that could be sold or traded. What remained was meager, a half-pound of cornmeal in a jar Eva had hidden under her mattress to make bread when Papa came home, a few potatoes in the root cellar that Thomas must have missed, and the 3 scrawny chickens that lived in a pen behind the cabin. It wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to feed 7 people for more than a few days, let alone through the coming winter. Nora had 2 traps, simple snares she'd learned to set from her father when she was young. She'd set them that first afternoon in the woods behind their property, her hands shaking so badly she'd had to redo the mechanisms 3 times. She'd checked them every morning since. Empty. Both of them. Empty. On the 3rd morning, she stood in front of those empty traps and felt something inside her crack. "Please," she whispered to the indifferent forest. "Please. They need." But the forest gave her nothing but silence and the rustle of wind through pine branches. She'd tried to hide her fear from the children, but they knew. Children always knew. They'd grown quiet over the past 3 days, their usual noise and chaos muted to worried whispers. They ate the tiny portions she gave them without complaint, even though she could see the hunger in their eyes. Eva had stopped asking when their father was coming home. That night, after putting the children to bed with yet another too-small meal, Nora sat at the rough wooden table Thomas had built when they first homesteaded this land. A single candle burned between her hands, the flame guttering in the draft that came through the poorly chinked walls. She'd been so careful with that candle. It was one of only 3 they had left, and she'd been rationing them the same way she rationed food. But tonight, she needed the light, needed something to push back the darkness that pressed in from all sides. The ledger lay open in front of her. She'd been going over the numbers for hours, trying to find some solution, some way forward that she'd missed. But the arithmetic was brutal and unforgiving. No money, no supplies, no wagon to get to town, no horse to ride. Even if she could somehow walk the 15 miles to town with 6 children, the youngest only 3 years old, what would she do when she got there? She had no skills to sell except her ability to clean and cook, but those required her to leave her children somewhere safe. And there was nowhere safe. No family nearby, no friends close enough to help. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and she'd never even met them. They were alone. Completely, utterly alone. Nora put her head in her hands and allowed herself, for the first time since finding Thomas's letter, to cry. She cried silently, shoulders shaking, tears dripping between her fingers onto the worn wood of the table. She cried for the life she'd lost, for the husband who'd promised to love and protect her and had abandoned her instead, for the children upstairs who deserved so much better than this. She cried because she was terrified. She cried because she didn't know how to save them. She cried because tomorrow she would have to wake up and be strong again, and she was so tired of being strong. The candle burned lower. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, the sound lonely and wild. Nora lifted her head and wiped her eyes with her apron. The fabric came away wet, but she didn't care. In the morning, she would check the traps again. She would portion out another inadequate meal. She would smile at her children and tell them everything would be all right. She would lie because that's what mothers did when the truth was too terrible to speak. But tonight, alone in the candlelight, Nora Allen let herself admit the truth she couldn't say out loud. They might not survive this. The 4th morning dawned gray and cold, a hint of the autumn to come threading through the air. Nora woke early as always, her body stiff from another night sleeping in the chair by the stove. She'd given her own mattress to the children weeks ago when they'd all still been a family. The memory of that decision, made in a time when she'd had a husband and hope, felt like it belonged to a different person. She made herself stand, made herself stretch, made herself move through the morning routine. Light the stove, careful with the kindling, they were running low. Heat the water for washing. Mix the last of the cornmeal with water to make a thin gruel. She was dividing the gruel between 7 tin bowls, making sure each child's portion was slightly larger than her own, even though it meant her stomach would gnaw at itself all day. When she heard it, hoofbeats. Nora froze, her hand tightening around the wooden spoon. No one came out here. In the 2 years they'd been on this homestead, they'd had exactly 3 visitors. The land agent when they first claimed the property, a traveling preacher the following spring, and a half-starved prospector who'd begged water and moved on. The hoofbeats grew closer, multiple horses, moving at an easy pace. Fear flooded through Nora's veins. She set down the spoon and moved to the window, pressing herself against the wall so she could see out without being easily seen. 2 riders were approaching the cabin. Both men. Both strangers. Her first instinct was to grab the children and hide, but where? The cabin had only 1 room on the ground floor, 1 loft above. The root cellar was too small to fit them all. The woods were too far. The hoofbeats stopped. Nora's heart hammered against her ribs. She glanced up at the loft where the children were still sleeping, all except Eva, who had appeared at the top of the ladder, her eyes wide with the same fear Nora felt. "Mama?" Eva whispered. "Stay up there," Nora whispered back. "Keep the others quiet." Eva nodded and disappeared. A knock sounded at the door, 3 measured raps that somehow managed to sound both firm and respectful. Nora looked around for a weapon. The kitchen knife, small but sharp. She grabbed it and held it behind her back as she approached the door. "Who's there?" Her voice came out stronger than she felt. "Ma'am?" The voice was male, deep and calm. "My name is Colton Reyes. I own the Copper Ridge Ranch about 5 miles west of here. This is my ranch hand, Jim Torres. We're checking on folks in the area before winter sets in, making sure everyone's got what they need." Nora didn't move. It could be a lie. A trick. Men out here sometimes preyed on isolated homesteaders, and a woman alone with children would be an easy target. "Ma'am, I know you don't know me, and I respect your caution, but I'd appreciate a chance to talk to you face to face. I'll stand well back from the door if that makes you more comfortable." There was something in the voice that made Nora hesitate. Not just the words, but the tone, patient, understanding, the voice of someone who recognized her fear and wasn't offended by it. She made a decision. "Step back from the door. Let me see you." "Yes, ma'am." She heard boots on the wooden porch, moving away. After a moment, she cracked the door open just enough to peer through. Two men stood in her yard, both a good 20 feet from the cabin. The one who must be Colton Reyes was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing work clothes that had seen hard use but were clean and well-maintained. He held his hat in his hands, his dark hair slightly disheveled from the ride. His face was weathered in the way of men who worked outside, but kind, patient. The other man, Jim Torres, was older, leaner, with silver threading through his black hair. He stayed a respectful step behind Colton, his hands loose at his sides, deliberately non-threatening. Colton Reyes met her eyes through the crack in the door. "Mrs. Allen, I presume?" The fact that he knew her name sent a fresh jolt of fear through her, until she realized, of course he'd know. They'd filed the homestead claim under Thomas's name. Anyone who bothered to check county records would know the Allen family lived here. "How can I help you?" Nora kept her voice neutral, professional. "Like I said, ma'am, we're just checking on folks, making sure everyone's prepared for winter. It comes hard and fast out here, and—" He paused, his eyes moving past her to take in what little he could see of the cabin's interior. "Well, isolated homesteads can face challenges." "We're fine." The lie tasted like ash on her tongue. Colton Reyes didn't react to the obvious falsehood. He just stood there, patient as stone, his hat turning slowly in his hands. "Is your husband about, ma'am? I'd like to speak with him if he's available." Nora's grip tightened on the knife behind her back. "He's away. Working." "I see." Something shifted in Colton's expression. Not judgment, but understanding, the kind of understanding that made Nora's throat tight. "When do you expect him back?" "I don't know." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. Colton nodded slowly. He glanced at Jim, some silent communication passing between them, then looked back at Nora. "Mrs. Allen, I noticed your traps in the woods back there when we rode up. They're well made but poorly positioned. If you'd like, Jim here could show you some better spots. He's the best trapper in 3 counties. The offer was so unexpected, so matter-of-fact, that Nora didn't know how to respond. "Why?" The question came out harsher than she'd intended. "Why would you help me?" Colton's expression didn't change. "Because you need it. And because out here, neighbors help neighbors. That's how we all survive. I don't need charity." "Good. I'm not offering charity." He settled his hat back on his head. "I'm offering knowledge. If your husband's away and you're managing alone, you need to know how to make those traps work. Pride won't feed your family, Mrs. Allen, but a well-set trap will." The words hit harder than Nora wanted to admit. She wanted to slam the door in his face, wanted to tell him to leave, wanted to maintain the illusion that she had everything under control. But 6 children were depending on her. 6 children who'd gone to bed hungry last night and would wake up hungry this morning. "All right," she heard herself say. "Show me." Jim Torres proved to be a man of few words but vast knowledge. He'd repositioned both her traps within an hour, explaining in his quiet, accented voice exactly why the new locations would yield better results. He'd shown her how to disguise her scent, how to read animal tracks, how to adjust the tension on the snares for different-sized prey. Nora absorbed every word, every gesture, committing it all to memory with the desperate intensity of someone who knew this information might mean the difference between life and death. Colton Reyes had stayed back at the cabin, sitting on the porch steps at a respectful distance, while Eva brought the younger children outside. Nora had watched from the corner of her eye as he'd tipped his hat to her daughter, as he'd smiled at little Levi's shy wave, as he'd sat quietly and let them grow accustomed to his presence without forcing interaction. By the time Jim finished with the traps and led Nora back to the cabin, the children had migrated closer to Colton. Not too close, they were still wary, but close enough that Nora could hear Eva asking him about his ranch. "We run cattle mostly," Colton was saying, his voice easy and conversational. "Some horses. A few sheep that Jim's convinced me to try. though I'm not sold on them yet. Do you have children? Eva asked. Eva, Nora said sharply, don't pry. But Colton just shook his head. It's all right, ma'am. And no, Miss Eva, I don't. It's just me and the men who work the ranch. Don't you get lonely? The question was so innocent, so pure in its curiosity, that Nora almost didn't notice the shadow that crossed Colton's face. But she saw it, a flash of something painful quickly hidden. Sometimes, he admitted, but there's always work to be done, and that helps. Jim had finished explaining the last trap placement and now stood beside his horse, ready to leave. Colton stood as well, brushing dust from his pants. Mrs. Allen, he said, I wonder if I might have a word in private before we go? Every instinct Nora had screamed caution, but Jim Torres was already swinging into his saddle, and the children were right there, and somehow she found herself nodding. She followed Colton a short distance from the cabin, far enough that the children couldn't overhear, but close enough that she could see them. Mrs. Allen, Colton said quietly, I'm going to speak plain if you'll allow it. Nora lifted her chin. I've never appreciated anything else. Fair enough. He looked at her directly, his gray eyes steady. Your husband isn't coming back, is he? The directness of the question stole Nora's breath. For a moment she couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there while her carefully maintained facade crumbled. How did you? The wagon's gone. The lean-to's empty. You're setting traps yourself instead of sending your husband to do it. And when I mentioned him, you got the look of someone who's been gut-punched. Colton's voice was gentle but firm. I've seen enough in this life to recognize abandonment when I see it. Nora's hands clenched into fists at her sides. If you've come to gloat, I've come to help. The simplicity of the statement stunned her into silence. Colton continued, his voice low and urgent. Winter will be here in 6 weeks. Maybe 8 if we're lucky. You've got 6 children, no supplies, no wagon, and from what I can see, very little food. You can't make it through winter like this, Mrs. Allen. You know it, and I know it. I'll manage. But even to her own ears, the words sounded hollow. How? It wasn't a challenge, just a question. Even if those traps bring in game every day, which they won't, you can't preserve meat without salt, and you don't have salt. You can't plant a garden now, it's too late in the season. You can't get to town to buy supplies, and even if you could, you have no money. So tell me, how are you planning to manage? Each word was a nail driven into the coffin of her hopes. Nora felt her throat constrict, felt tears burning behind her eyes that she absolutely would not shed in front of this stranger. What do you want from me? Her voice came out raw, defensive. Nothing. Colton's answer was immediate. I want nothing from you, Mrs. Allen, but I'm offering something: work, wages, and shelter. The Copper Ridge Ranch needs help preparing for winter. There's wood to split, fences to mend, preserving to be done, 100 tasks that need extra hands. I'd hire you and pay fair wages, room, board, and money enough to get you through until spring, when you can decide what comes next. Nora stared at him. You're offering me work? On your ranch? Yes, ma'am. With my children? All of them. I've got a bunkhouse for my hands, and a main house that's got more room than one man needs. You and your children would stay in the house. It's warm, weatherproof, and safe. The older children can help with age-appropriate tasks if they're willing, but the main work would be yours. It was too good to be true, too generous, too perfect, which meant there had to be a catch. What do you really want? Nora asked, her voice hard. She'd learned in 11 years of marriage to Thomas Allen that men always wanted something, always had an angle. Colton held her gaze steadily. I told you, help preparing for winter. That's it. You expect me to believe you'd take in a woman and 6 children out of pure goodness of heart? I expect you to believe I'm a rancher who needs work done and is willing to pay for it. He paused, then added quietly, but if you want the whole truth, Mrs. Allen, I'll give it to you. I know what it's like to be alone and scared with winter coming. I know what it's like to wonder if you'll make it through. And I know what it's like to have someone offer a hand when you need it most. The man who helped me is gone now, but I can pay it forward. So yes, there's some goodness of heart in this offer, but there's also genuine need for your labor. Both things can be true. Nora searched his face for any sign of deception, any hint of ulterior motive. But all she saw was sincerity and a bone-deep kindness that made her want to weep. "I need to think about it," she said. "Of course." Colton tipped his hat. "Jim and I will ride out this way again in 2 days. If you decide to accept, we can take you and your family back to the ranch then. If not, I'll respect your decision and won't trouble you further." He started to turn away, then paused. "Mrs. Allen? One more thing. Jim left some supplies on your porch. Flour, salt pork, beans, some other basics. Not charity," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "Consider it an advance on your wages if you take the job. If you don't, you can repay me someday when you're on your feet." Before Nora could respond, he'd mounted his horse and was riding away with Jim, both men heading west toward the Copper Ridge Ranch. Nora stood in her yard, watching them disappear over the horizon, her mind reeling. She turned to see Eva standing on the porch, surrounded by her siblings, all of them staring at the bags and bundles Colton had mentioned. "Mama?" Eva's voice was small, hopeful. Is that food?" Nora walked to the porch on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. She opened the first bag and found flour, real white flour, not the rough cornmeal they'd been rationing. The next bag held salt pork, thick slabs of it wrapped in cloth. Beans, sugar, coffee, even a small jar of honey. It was more food than they'd had in weeks. Nora sank down onto the porch steps, her hands shaking. "Mama, are you crying?" James asked, his young voice worried. She touched her cheek and found it wet. She was crying, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of despair. "Yes, baby," she whispered. "But these are good tears. These are very good tears." For the next 2 days, Nora barely slept. She cooked her children proper meals for the first time since Thomas left, watching them eat with a hunger that went beyond mere satisfaction of appetite. She watched Ruth and Rebecca giggle over their full bowls. She watched Samuel eat until his small stomach was round. She watched little Levi lick every last bit of honey from his fingers, his eyes bright with joy. And every moment, Nora's mind churned with the decision she had to make: accept Colton Reyes's offer or refuse it. The practical part of her, the part that had learned to survive through 2 harsh Montana winters, through Thomas's increasing absence and neglect, through countless small hardships, screamed at her to accept. It was the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice that would give her children food and shelter and a chance to make it through to spring. But the other part of her, the proud part, the part that had endured her husband's abandonment and didn't want to trade one form of dependence for another, rebelled against accepting help from a stranger. What if Colton Reyes wasn't what he seemed? What if this kindness was a trap? What if he expected payment of a different kind once she was isolated on his ranch, with no way to leave? Nora had heard stories. Women alone were vulnerable, and some men saw that vulnerability as opportunity. But then she'd remember the way Colton had kept his distance from the cabin, the way he'd spoken to her with respect, not condescension, the way he'd looked at her children, not with calculation, but with something like sadness. "I know what it's like to be alone and scared with winter coming." What had happened to Colton Reyes that made him understand that feeling? On the evening of the second day, Nora sat the children down after supper and told them about the offer. "A ranch?" James's eyes lit up. "With horses and cows?" "And we'd live there?" Eva asked carefully. "All of us?" "Yes. Mr. Reyes has offered us room and board in exchange for work." "What kind of work?" Eva was always the practical one. "Preparing for winter, cooking, cleaning, preserving, mending, things I know how to do. And perhaps some of you older ones could help with lighter tasks, if you're willing." "Is Papa coming there?" The question came from Samuel, his 5-year-old voice small and uncertain. Nora's heart clenched. She'd been as honest with them as she could be about Thomas's absence, but Samuel was still young enough to believe his father would come back, that somehow this would all be fixed. "No, sweetheart, Papa isn't coming." "Ever?" The word hung in the air like smoke. Nora looked at each of her children. Eva with her 2 old eyes, James with his hopeful face, the twins holding hands, Samuel with his blanket clutched tight, Levi who was too young to fully understand but sensed the tension in the room. "I don't know," she said honestly, "but I do know this. We need help. and Mr. Reyes is offering it. I need you all to tell me what you think. Should we go to his ranch, or should we stay here? Will there be enough food there? This from Ruth, quiet and serious. Yes. Mr. Reyes runs a successful ranch. There will be food. Will it be warm? Rebecca this time. Yes. The house is weatherproof and has a good stove. Will Mr. Reyes hurt us? Eva's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the room like a knife. Nora met her daughter's eyes. I don't think so. I believe he's a good man, but I can't promise anything with absolute certainty, Eva. I can only tell you what my instincts say, and they say we can trust him. Eva nodded slowly. Then she looked at her younger siblings and back at her mother. I think we should go, she said. I think we'll die if we stay here. The bluntness of the statement shocked Nora, but she couldn't deny its truth. Eva had always been perceptive. She knew how dire their situation was. I want to go too, James said. I want to see the horses. Me too, Samuel added. The twins nodded in unison. Levi, not understanding but wanting to be part of the conversation, raised his small hand. Go! Nora looked at her children, her 6 reasons for living, her 6 sources of strength, and felt something settle in her chest. All right, she said quietly. We'll go. Colton Reyes and Jim Torres arrived the next morning as promised, just after sunrise. Nora had spent the night packing what little they owned, clothes that were more patches than original fabric, the few books Eva cherished, the blankets from the loft, small treasures the children couldn't bear to leave behind. It all fit in 2 small bags. 2 bags to hold the remnants of their life. The children were awake and dressed, scrubbed clean with the last of their water, nervous energy making them fidget and whisper. Eva stood close to Nora, her small hand occasionally reaching out to touch her mother's arm, as if reassuring herself that Nora was still there. When the horses appeared on the horizon, Nora's heart began to pound. This was it. The moment of decision, of trust, of stepping into the unknown. Colton dismounted and walked toward the cabin, his approach as measured and respectful as it had been 2 days ago. But this time, Nora walked out to meet him. Mr. Reyes, she said formally, we've decided to accept your offer. Something like relief crossed his face. I'm glad to hear it, Mrs. Allen. But I have conditions. He nodded. I expected you would. First, I want a written agreement. Wages, duties, terms of employment, all of it in writing. Agreed. We can draw that up as soon as we reach the ranch. Second, my children are off limits for any work beyond light chores suitable to their ages. I won't have them worked like hired hands. Agreed. I wouldn't dream of it. Third, we stay in your main house, as you offered, but you keep your distance. I'll do my work, you pay my wages, and we maintain professional boundaries. Is that clear? Colton's expression didn't change. Crystal clear, ma'am. I'll move to the bunkhouse with Jim and the other hands. You and your family will have the house to yourselves. Nora studied him, looking for any sign of resentment or offense, but she found only patience and understanding. And fourth, she continued, her voice dropping lower so the children wouldn't hear, if at any point I feel unsafe or my children are threatened in any way, I reserve the right to leave immediately. No argument, no negotiation. We leave, and you don't follow. Agreed? Agreed. Colton's voice was just as quiet, just as serious. Mrs. Allen, I give you my word. You and your children are under my protection. I would die before I'd let harm come to any of you. The intensity of the promise made Nora's breath catch. She wanted to question it, to probe for weakness or falseness, but something in Colton's eyes stopped her. He meant it, every word. All right then, she said. Let's go. The ride to the Copper Ridge Ranch took most of the day. Jim had brought a wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses, and Nora and the children rode in the back while Colton and Jim rode alongside. The children's initial nervousness had given way to wonder as they traveled. They'd never ventured this far from their homestead before, and everything was new and exciting. Look, Mama! James pointed at a hawk circling overhead. It's huge. Stay seated, James, Nora cautioned, but she was watching the hawk too, grateful for the distraction from her churning thoughts. Eva sat close to her, quiet and observant. Mama, she whispered, Are you scared? Nora considered lying, then decided against it. A little, she admitted. But sometimes being brave means being scared and doing the thing anyway. Papa was never scared. The comment was so unexpected that Nora almost didn't know how to respond. She looked down at her daughter, seeing the confusion and hurt in her young face. Your papa? Nora chose her words carefully. Your papa was scared of different things. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is face their fears. And sometimes running away from your fears makes you a coward. Eva processed this in silence, then nodded slowly. Mr. Reyes isn't a coward. What makes you say that? He's scared too. I can see it. But he's still helping us. Nora blinked in surprise. What do you think he's scared of? Eva shrugged. I don't know, but I saw it in his eyes when I asked if he had children. He got the same look you get when someone mentions Papa. Sometimes Nora forgot how observant her daughter was, how much she saw and understood that other 10-year-olds might miss. You're very wise, Eva Allen. Am I still Eva Allen? The question was quiet, uncertain. Or am I something else now? You're whoever you want to be, sweetheart. Names don't define us. Choices do. They rode on in silence after that, the wagon creaking over the rough terrain, the Montana sky vast and blue overhead. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Colton rode up alongside the wagon. We're almost there, he said, pointing ahead. Nora followed his gaze and saw it, a valley opening up before them, with a creek running through it and buildings clustered near the water. A barn, several outbuildings, corrals, and, her breath caught, a house. A real house, 2 stories tall with a wide porch, smoke rising from the chimney. It looked like something from a dream. Welcome to Copper Ridge, Colton said quietly. As they descended into the valley, Nora saw men working near the barn, ranch hands, she assumed. They stopped to watch the wagon approach, their expressions curious but not hostile. Colton raised a hand in greeting, and they returned the gesture before going back to their work. The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house, and Jim jumped down to help Nora and the children disembark. The moment Nora's feet hit solid ground, she felt her legs shake, from exhaustion, from relief, from the overwhelming sense of unreality that had been building all day. This way, Colton said, gesturing toward the house. He led them up the porch steps and through the front door into a large, open room. Nora stopped dead, her children clustering around her, all of them staring. It was warm, clean, spacious. A large fireplace dominated one wall, a long wooden table sat in the center of the room, and doorways led to what must be a kitchen and other rooms beyond. Rugs covered the wooden floor, curtains hung at the windows. It smelled like wood smoke and coffee and home. It smelled like home. The kitchen's through there, Colton said, pointing. Pantry's stocked, though you'll want to take inventory and let me know if anything's missing. 3 bedrooms upstairs. You and the younger children can take the larger one, and the older ones can share the other 2 if that suits. There's a bathing room at the back with a pump and tub. Outhouse is just outside, but we're working on putting in proper facilities. He paused, seeming suddenly uncertain. I know it's not much. Not much? Nora's voice came out strangled. She looked at him with disbelief. But, Mr. Reyes, this is... She gestured helplessly at the house, unable to find words. It's perfect, Mama, Eva whispered, her eyes wide. Levi had already toddled over to the fireplace and was sitting on the rug, transfixed by the flames. You really lived here alone? James asked Colton. I did, but it's always felt too big for one person. I think it was meant for a family. There was something in the way he said it, a wistfulness, a grief, that made Nora's chest tight. Mr. Reyes, she said quietly. Thank you. We won't let you regret this. Colton met her eyes, and for a moment something passed between them. An understanding, a connection. The first fragile thread of trust. I don't think regret's something I need to worry about, Mrs. Allen, he said. Then he tipped his hat. I'll let you all settle in. Jim's bringing your things from the wagon. If you need anything, I'll be in the bunkhouse just beyond the barn. Otherwise, I'll see you at breakfast tomorrow to discuss the work schedule. He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Nora stood in the center of the room, this beautiful, warm, safe room, and felt something inside her begin to thaw. For the first time since Thomas had abandoned them, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. "Children," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "let's explore our new home." The first week at Copper Ridge Ranch passed in a blur of discovery and adjustment. Nora woke that first morning in a real bed for the first time in months, sunlight streaming through actual glass windows, and for a disorienting moment couldn't remember where she was. Then she heard the soft breathing of her children around her, Levi curled against her side, the twins in a small bed near the window, Samuel's gentle snores from his corner, and memory flooded back. They were safe. They were warm. They were fed. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to lie there and wonder before her practical nature reasserted itself. Colton Reyes was paying for their room and board, which meant she had work to do. Nora slipped out of bed without waking the children and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet in the pre-dawn light, peaceful in a way their old homestead had never been. She found the kitchen exactly where Colton had indicated, a large, well-equipped space with a massive cast-iron stove, shelves lined with dishes, and a pantry that made her breath catch. The pantry was full, not just adequately stocked, but genuinely, abundantly full. Flour and cornmeal in large barrels, sugar and salt in generous containers, coffee, tea, dried beans, rice, preserved fruits, smoked meats hanging from hooks in the ceiling, potatoes and onions in bins, herbs hanging in bundles. Nora stood in the doorway and felt tears prick her eyes. This much food could feed her family for months. For the first time since Thomas left, she didn't have to calculate every bite. Didn't have to watch her children go hungry. Didn't have to choose which child got a slightly larger portion. "Mrs. Allen." She spun around to find Colton standing in the kitchen doorway, his hat in his hands, looking apologetic for startling her. "I'm sorry," she said quickly, wiping her eyes. "I was just taking inventory." "I know. That's good thinking." He gestured toward the stove. "I started the fire earlier, thought it might make the morning easier." Nora looked at the stove and realized it was already warm, embers glowing in the firebox. "You didn't have to do that." "Old habits. I've been lighting that stove for 5 years. Hard to break the routine." He shifted his weight, suddenly seeming uncertain. "About breakfast. How many will there be? Just you and the children, or how many ranch hands do you have?" "6, including Jim, but we usually eat in the bunkhouse, so—" "Mr. Reyes," Nora interrupted, "if I'm to earn my keep as cook, then I'll cook for everyone. It makes no sense to maintain 2 separate kitchens." Colton hesitated. "That's a lot of mouths to feed, Mrs. Allen. 8 working men plus you and 6 children. I don't want to overwhelm you on your first day." "I've been feeding a family on scraps for weeks. Cooking proper meals with proper ingredients for a set number of people sounds like a blessing, not a burden." She straightened her shoulders. "Breakfast will be ready at 6. Please inform your men." For a moment, Colton just looked at her, something like admiration flickering in his gray eyes. Then he nodded. "Yes, ma'am. 6 o'clock." He started to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Allen? Thank you. The men will appreciate it, and so do I." After he left, Nora stood alone in the kitchen and allowed herself a small smile. She might be dependent on Colton Reyes' charity at the moment, but she would earn every penny he paid her. She would prove her worth, and maybe, in the process, prove it to herself. By the time 6 o'clock arrived, Nora had transformed the kitchen into organized chaos. Eva had come down to help, and together they'd prepared a breakfast that would have seemed like a feast just days ago. Scrambled eggs from the henhouse, thick slices of bacon, biscuits with butter and jam, fried potatoes, and strong coffee. The children sat at one end of the long table, their eyes wide as they took in the spread of food. Nora had told them to wait, that the ranch hands would eat first, but Colton had quietly insisted there was enough for everyone to eat together. When the men filed in, rough, weathered cowboys who removed their hats and nodded respectfully to Nora, she felt a flutter of nervousness. But they took their seats without fuss, waited until she and the children were seated, and only then began to eat. "Ma'am," one of them said after the first bite, his weathered face creasing into a smile, "this is the finest breakfast I've had in 2 years." "Tom's right," another added. "Mr. Reyes does his best, but his biscuits could be used as ammunition." Laughter rippled around the table. Even Colton smiled, though he shook his head. I never claimed to be a cook, Davis. That's the honest truth, Jim Torres said dryly, earning more chuckles. Nora watched the easy camaraderie between the men and felt something in her chest loosen. This wasn't a hostile environment. These weren't dangerous men. They were workers, laborers, men who appreciated a good meal and showed respect where it was due. Mr. Reyes tells us you've got 6 young ones, the one called Tom said, directing his comment to Nora, but smiling at the children. That must keep you busy. Every moment of every day, Nora admitted, though they're good children. We can see that. Well-mannered. You've done right by them, ma'am. The compliment, simple and sincere, hit Nora harder than she expected. When was the last time someone had praised her parenting? Thomas certainly never had. Thank you, she managed. After breakfast, the men filed out to begin their day's work, each one thanking Nora for the meal. Colton lingered while she and Eva began clearing plates. Mrs. Allen, might we discuss the work schedule? Of course. Nora wiped her hands on her apron. Eva, can you watch your brothers and sisters for a few minutes? Eva nodded solemnly, already herding the younger children toward the stairs. Colton waited until they were alone, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket. I had Jim ride to town yesterday and have the land agent draw this up. It's the written agreement you asked for. Nora took the paper and read carefully. The terms were more than fair. They were generous. Room and board for her entire family, plus wages of $15 a month. Her duties were listed clearly: cooking for the household, basic cleaning and maintenance, assisting with food preservation, mending when needed. This says I'm to manage the household, Nora said slowly. That's a position of responsibility, Mr. Reyes. You're responsible for 6 children. I figure managing a household is well within your capabilities. And $15 a month is more than most cooks make. You're not just a cook. You're managing my home, feeding my men, and doing it while caring for your family. That's worth fair compensation. He met her eyes steadily. If you think the terms are unfair, we can renegotiate. No, Nora said quickly. No, the terms they're more than fair. Thank you. She signed the agreement with hands that only trembled slightly. Colton signed as witness, and just like that, it was official. She was employed. Her children would have food and shelter through the winter. They were going to survive. I'll let you get settled into a routine, Colton said, folding his copy of the agreement. But if you need anything, supplies, help, whatever, Jim knows where everything is stored, and any of the men can assist. Mr. Reyes, Nora said as he turned to leave. Why are you doing this? He stopped, his back to her. For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then quietly, because I know what it's like to lose everything, Mrs. Allen, and I know what it's like when someone offers you a chance to start over. This is me paying that forward. Before she could ask what he meant, he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. The days began to develop a rhythm. Nora woke before dawn and started breakfast. The children helped where they could. Eva was becoming quite skilled at making biscuits, and James took pride in gathering eggs from the hen house each morning. The men ate at 6, then headed out to work on various ranch tasks. After breakfast, Nora cleaned the kitchen while the children did their lessons. She was determined they wouldn't fall behind in their education, even out here. Midday, she prepared dinner, the main meal of the day for working men. The ranch hands came in hungry and left satisfied. Nora discovered she enjoyed cooking when she had proper ingredients to work with. She tried new recipes, experimented with the herbs from the garden, learned to make the kind of hearty, stick-to-your-ribs meals that fueled hard labor. Afternoons were for preserving, mending, cleaning, and the 100 other tasks that kept a household running. The older children helped, learning skills they'd need for their own futures. Eva proved to have a talent for sewing. James could mend a fence rail nearly as well as the ranch hands. Even the younger ones contributed. The twins collected eggs, Samuel hauled kindling, and Levi. Well, Levi mostly stayed out of trouble, which was contribution enough for a 3-year-old. Evenings, after supper was cleared and the children were in bed, Nora would sit by the fire with mending or knitting and allow herself to simply exist. No fear of Thomas coming home drunk. No worry about where the next meal would come from. Just peace, warmth, and the quiet crackle of burning wood. Sometimes Colton would stop by the house after his evening rounds. ostensibly to discuss household matters, but really, Nora suspected, to check that they were settling in all right. He never stayed long, never overstepped the boundaries she'd set, but those brief conversations became something Nora found herself looking forward to. "How are the children adjusting?" he asked one evening, about a week after their arrival. "Better than I expected," Nora admitted. "Levi follows Jim around like a shadow whenever Jim's near the house. The twins have taken to gathering eggs like they were born to it. James asked if he could help in the barn. And Eva, Nora smiled. "Eva found your library." Colton's expression shifted, surprise mixed with something that might have been pleasure. "The books in the study? She spent 2 hours yesterday just looking at the titles. I've never seen her so excited. She wanted to know if she was allowed to read them." "Of course she is. All of them." Colton's voice was soft. Someone I knew used to say that books gathering dust were a crime against knowledge. They should be read." There it was again, that hint of a past pain quickly hidden. Nora wanted to ask, wanted to understand what had shaped this quiet, generous man, but she held back. She had her secrets. He was entitled to his. "I'll tell her," Nora said instead. "She'll be over the moon." "What about you, Mrs. Allen? How are you adjusting?" The question caught her off guard. People asked about the children constantly, but rarely about her. It's strange," she admitted. "Good strange, but strange. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for this to turn out to be temporary or too good to be true." "It's not too good. It's just good. You deserve good things, Mrs. Allen." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet conviction, made Nora's throat tight. "I'm not sure I do," she whispered. "Why would you think that?" "Because my husband left me. Because I must have done something wrong, been something wrong to make him want to run. Because—" "Stop." Colton's voice was firm but not harsh. "Your husband leaving is a reflection of his character, not yours. A man who abandons his wife and 6 children is a coward and a fool. That's on him, Mrs. Allen, not you." Nora looked up at him, this man she barely knew, and saw absolute sincerity in his eyes. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you well enough to see you're a good mother, a hard worker, and stronger than you give yourself credit for. That's enough." He left shortly after, but his words stayed with Nora long into the night. The second week brought the first real test. Nora was in the kitchen preparing bread when she heard shouting from outside. She looked out the window to see James running toward the barn, his face pale with fear. Her heart lurched. She grabbed her shawl and ran. By the time she reached the barn, a small crowd had gathered. She pushed through to find James standing beside Colton, both of them looking at something in one of the stalls. "What happened?" Nora demanded. "Mama, I'm sorry." James's voice shook. "I was trying to help, and the horse got spooked, and—" "He's fine," Colton interrupted gently. James did exactly right. When the mare reared, he backed away instead of trying to control her. He could have been hurt if he'd done otherwise. Nora's relief was so profound it made her dizzy. She pulled James against her side, feeling his small body trembling. "I just wanted to help with the horses," James said miserably. "Like the men do." "And you will," Colton said. "But horses are big, powerful animals. They need to be approached with respect and knowledge. Tell you what, if it's all right with your mother, Jim can teach you proper horse handling. That way you'll know how to stay safe." James's face lit up. "Really? Mama, can I?" Nora looked at Colton over her son's head. "You don't have to." "I want to. James has a good instinct with animals. With proper training, he could be an excellent horseman." "Please, Mama?" How could she refuse? James had so little joy since Thomas left. If working with horses gave him purpose, gave him confidence. "All right," she agreed. "But you do exactly what Jim tells you. No shortcuts, no thinking you know better. Understood?" "Yes, ma'am." James was practically vibrating with excitement. As he ran off to find Jim, Colton turned to Nora. "He's a good boy." "He's 7 years old and thinks he's a man," Nora said, but there was fondness in her voice. "At 7, I thought the same thing. My father put me to work in the stables, and it was the making of me. Hard work, responsibility, learning a skill. It's good for a boy." "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." Colton's expression shuddered. "He was many things, Wise was occasionally one of them. Before Nora could respond, Tom came running up. Boss, we've got a fence down on the north pasture. Looks like the storm last night took out a whole section. How many posts? At least 20, maybe more. Colton swore under his breath. All right, get Davis and Cooper. We'll ride out and assess the damage. He turned to Nora. I might be late for dinner. I'll keep it warm. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, something comfortable and domestic that felt both natural and terrifying. Then Colton was striding away, already calling orders to his men, and Nora was left standing in the barn with her heart beating just slightly too fast. That evening, Nora kept dinner warm as promised. The men came in exhausted and mud-splattered, and she served them hot stew and fresh bread without comment. They ate in grateful silence, too tired even for their usual banter. Colton was the last to finish. As the others filed out, he lingered by the table. Long day? Nora asked, refilling his coffee. Long day, he agreed. But the fence is mended. We'll need to replace those posts properly come spring, but the temporary fix will hold through winter. You work hard. So do you. Nora smiled slightly. I cook and clean. You mend fences in the mud. You feed 8 working men 3 meals a day, keep this house running, teach your children, and do it all while healing from… He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. From everything you've been through. That's harder than mending fences, Mrs. Allen. Nora, she said quietly. When it's just us, you can call me Nora. Colton looked up, surprise evident in his tired eyes. Only if you call me Colton. All right. Colton. His name felt strange on her tongue. Intimate in a way Mr. Reyes had never been, but not uncomfortable, just new. Nora, he said, testing it out, then softer. It suits you. Before the moment could stretch into something neither of them was ready for, the door burst open and Levi came running in, his nightgown flapping around his small legs. Mama, Eva says I have to sleep, but I'm not tired. Nora caught her youngest son and lifted him onto her hip with practiced ease. Eva is right. Little boys need sleep to grow big and strong. But I want to stay up like the grown-ups. Colton stood, a smile playing at his lips. You know what all the grown-ups are about to do, Levi? What? Go to sleep, because we're tired from working hard all day. So if you want to be like the grown-ups, sleep is exactly what you should do. Levi considered this logic, his small face serious. You're going to sleep now? Soon as I finish this coffee. Okay. Levi yawned hugely, as if the mention of sleep had triggered his exhaustion. Good night, Mr. Colton. Good night, Levi. Nora carried her son toward the stairs but paused at the doorway. Thank you, Colton, for everything today. Nora? He stood in the lamplight, his weathered face gentle. You don't have to thank me every day for things I do anyway. Maybe I want to. She didn't wait for his response, just carried Levi upstairs to bed, her heart full of things she couldn't quite name. The third week, winter announced its approach with the first real cold snap. Nora woke to find frost on the windows and her breath misting in the air. She hurried to get the stove going, shivering in her nightgown, and was surprised to find it already warm when she reached the kitchen. Colton stood by the stove, adding wood to the firebox. You're up early, Nora said. Wanted to make sure the house was warm before you and the children woke up. It's cold enough to freeze water in the trough. You didn't have to do that. I know. He closed the stove door and turned to face her. But I wanted to. There was something in his voice that made Nora suddenly, acutely aware that she was standing in her nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. It wasn't improper, he was fully dressed and respectful as always, but it felt intimate in a way their previous interactions hadn't. I should get dressed, she said. Of course, He gestured vaguely toward the door. They moved at the same time, nearly colliding in the narrow space between the table and the stove. Colton caught her elbow to steady her, and for a moment they stood close enough that Nora could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes, could smell the clean scent of soap and leather. Sorry, they both said simultaneously. Colton released her arm and stepped back, and Nora fled upstairs with her heart pounding for no reason she could rationally explain. When she came back down, fully dressed with her hair properly pinned, Colton was gone. but the kitchen was beautifully warm and she found a fresh pot of coffee already brewing on the stove. The incident lingered in Nora's mind all day, distracting her from her work. What was wrong with her? Colton was her employer, nothing more. The fact that he was kind and hardworking and gentle with her children didn't mean anything. But that night, as she was preparing to bank the fires before bed, she heard a commotion from the bunkhouse. Raised voices, then the sound of something breaking. Nora hesitated. It wasn't her business what the men did in their own quarters. But what if someone was hurt? She grabbed a shawl and hurried across the yard. The bunkhouse door stood ajar, lamplight spilling out into the darkness. She could hear voices inside, angry, argumentative. I'm telling you, that mare is going to die if we don't get a vet out here. And I'm telling you, the boss can't afford it right now, Cooper. We just spent a fortune replacing those fence posts. So we let a $1,000 animal die to save $50 on a vet? That's smart business? Nora pushed the door open. 6 men turned to look at her. Jim, Tom, Davis, Cooper, and 2 others whose names she'd learned were Frank and Samuel. Mrs. Allen, Jim said, standing quickly, is something wrong? I heard shouting. I wanted to make sure everyone was all right. We're fine, ma'am, just a disagreement about one of the horses. The bay mare in the end stall, Cooper added. She's got colic, and if we don't get help soon, she'll be dead by morning. Where's Colton? Rode to check the North Range. Won't be back till late. Nora made a decision. How much does a veterinarian cost? The men exchanged glances. About $50 for an emergency call, Tom said finally. And you said the horse is worth $1,000? Closer to $1,500. She's prime breeding stock. Nora did the math in her head. Then getting a vet is the obvious choice. Send someone to town immediately. Ma'am, with respect, that's not your decision to make. The boss is not here, and that animal can't wait. I'm the household manager, which means I manage household decisions in his absence. This is a household asset. Send for the vet. She said it with such authority that no one questioned her. Tom grabbed his coat and was out the door within minutes, riding hard for town. Nora spent the next 3 hours in the barn with the sick mare, doing what little she could to keep the animal comfortable. Jim stayed with her, his weathered face creased with worry. You didn't have to do this, ma'am, he said quietly. The boss might not appreciate you spending his money. If Colton values a horse's life less than $50, then I've misjudged him completely. But I don't think I have. Jim smiled slightly. No, ma'am, you haven't. The vet arrived just after midnight. Nora watched as he examined the mare, administered some kind of medicine, and finally stepped back with a satisfied nod. She'll be fine. You got me here just in time. Another hour and I couldn't have helped her. Relief flooded through Nora. Thank you. She paid the vet from the household account. Colton had given her access for emergencies, and this certainly qualified, and saw him off. Then she returned to the barn to find Jim still with the mare, stroking her neck as she rested more comfortably. You should get some sleep, Jim. So should you, ma'am. You've been up as long as I have. I will. I want to make sure she's truly all right. They sat in companionable silence for a while, the barn warm and quiet around them. Finally, Jim spoke. The boss hasn't told you, has he? Told me what? About why he lives out here alone. About what happened. Nora's pulse quickened. No, he's never said. Jim seemed to debate with himself, then sighed. It's not my story to tell, but I'll say this. You saving this mare tonight, it means more than you know, more than just the money. Before Nora could ask what he meant, the barn door opened and Colton strode in, his face etched with worry. Jim, Tom said there was an emergency. He stopped dead when he saw Nora. What are you doing here? Is someone hurt? The bay mare had colic, Nora said, standing. I sent for the vet. She's going to be fine. Colton's eyes moved from Nora to the mare to Jim and back again. You sent for the vet. Yes, it cost $50. I paid from the household account. If you object, you can deduct it from my wages. Object? Colton's voice was strange. Nora, you might have saved her life. Why would I object? I didn't know if... It's a lot of money, and I made the decision without consulting you. Colton crossed to the mare's stall and ran his hand along her neck. The horse nickered softly, nuzzling his palm. For a long moment he just stood there, his shoulders tense beneath his coat. Then so quietly Nora almost didn't hear it. "Thank you." It was the right thing to do. It was, but not everyone would have done it. He turned to face her, and in the lamplight she could see something raw in his expression. This mare, her name is Grace. She was someone important to me, bred her, raised her from a foal. When that person died, Grace was all I had left of them. So you didn't just save a valuable horse tonight, Nora. You saved a piece of my past. The vulnerability in his voice made Nora's breath catch. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. "I'm glad she's all right," she said softly. Colton covered her hand with his own, his palm warm and calloused. They stood like that for a heartbeat, 2 heartbeats, neither speaking, neither moving. Then Jim cleared his throat. I'll check the other horses. Give you two some privacy." He disappeared into the shadows of the barn, leaving Nora and Colton alone, except for the soft sounds of the horses. "I should go back to the house," Nora whispered, but she didn't move. "Nora," Colton said, his voice rough, "I need to tell you something. About my past. About why I lived the way I do. You don't owe me explanations. Maybe not, but I want you to know." He released her hand and stepped back, putting space between them. "I was married once. Her name was Sarah. We met in Denver, fell in love fast and hard the way young people do. We got married, moved out here, started building this ranch together." Nora's heart clenched, past tense, was married. "Sarah got pregnant," Colton continued, his voice distant with memory. "We were over the moon. Started planning for the baby, talking about names, building a crib. She was 6 months along when she fell down the stairs in this house, broke her neck. The doctors tried to save the baby, but we lost them both." "Oh, Colton," Nora's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. It's been 5 years. Some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago." He looked at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I couldn't stay in our room after that. Couldn't bear to see the things we'd planned together. So I moved to the bunkhouse and tried to bury myself in work. Tried to forget." "Did it work?" "No. You can't outwork grief, I learned. You can only learn to carry it." He paused. "Grace was Sarah's horse, the one thing I couldn't let go of, even when I sold or gave away everything else." Nora understood now why Jim had said saving the mare meant more than she knew. It wasn't just about the animal's value. It was about preserving a connection to someone loved and lost. "When Ava asked if I had children," Colton said, "and I saw that look on your daughter's face, I saw Sarah in her, that hunger for knowledge, that brightness. And I thought maybe this house was meant to have children in it after all. Just not the way I'd originally planned." "Colton," Nora whispered, "bringing us here, giving us this chance. You've saved our lives. You know that, don't you? And you've given this place life again. You and your children. This house has been a tomb for 5 years, Nora. Now it's a home. You don't know what that means to me." They stood in the warm barn, surrounded by the gentle sounds of resting horses, and Nora felt something shift between them. This wasn't employer and employee anymore. This was something deeper, something more complicated, something that terrified her as much as it drew her in. "We should both get some sleep," she said finally. "Morning comes early." "It does." But Colton didn't move. "Nora? Thank you. For Grace, for everything. You're welcome." She walked back to the house alone, but she felt his eyes on her the whole way. And when she finally climbed into bed, she found herself thinking not about Thomas and the life she'd lost, but about Colton and the possibility of something she hadn't dared to imagine. Maybe, just maybe, broken things could be mended. And maybe, just maybe, she deserved a second chance at happiness. The morning after Colton's confession, Nora woke with a strange mixture of emotions churning in her chest. She lay in bed for a moment, listening to the soft breathing of her children, and tried to sort through what she was feeling. Sympathy for Colton's loss, certainly. The tragedy of losing both wife and child in one terrible moment was almost too much to bear thinking about. But there was something else too, a growing awareness that the boundaries she'd so carefully constructed between them were becoming harder to maintain. She pushed the thoughts away and rose to start the day. There was work to be done, and dwelling on complicated feelings wouldn't get breakfast on the table. Downstairs, she found the kitchen already warm. Again. Colton had clearly been there before dawn, stoking the fire, making sure she and the children wouldn't wake to cold. The gesture was so thoughtful, so considerate, that it made her throat tight. She was rolling out biscuit dough when Eva came down, her dark hair tangled from sleep. "Mama, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart." Eva hesitated, then said in a rush, "Do you like Mr. Colton?" Nora's hand stilled on the rolling pin. "What kind of question is that?" "I see how you look at him sometimes, and how he looks at you. James says you're going to marry him." "James should mind his own business," Nora said, more sharply than she intended. She softened her tone. "Eva, Mr. Colton is my employer. He's been very kind to us, but that doesn't mean—" "Papa was never kind like that." The simple statement hung in the air between them. "No," Nora admitted quietly. "He wasn't." "I don't miss Papa," Eva said, her voice small. "Is that bad? Should I miss him?" Nora set down the rolling pin and pulled her daughter into her arms. "Oh, sweetheart, you feel what you feel. There's no should about it. Your father made choices that hurt us all. You don't have to pretend to feel something you don't. The twins don't remember him hardly at all, and Levi doesn't remember him at all. Sometimes I wish I didn't either." "I know, I understand." Eva pulled back and looked up at her mother with those two wise eyes. "But Mr. Colton is different. He's what a father should be like, isn't he?" Before Nora could answer, the kitchen door opened and Colton himself appeared, stamping snow from his boots. "Morning, Mrs. Allen, Miss Eva. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to let you know we've got weather coming in. Big storm, probably by tonight. The men and I will be securing everything this morning, so we might miss dinner. Don't worry if we're late." "I'll keep food warm," Nora said, acutely aware of Eva watching the exchange with interest. "How bad is the storm expected to be?" "Bad enough. Could last a few days. But the house is solid, and we've got plenty of supplies. You and the children will be safe and warm." The way he said it, with such absolute certainty, made something in Nora's chest flutter. This man, who had known them barely a month, was more concerned for their well-being than their own father had ever been. "Thank you for the warning," she managed. Colton tipped his hat to them both and left. Eva turned to her mother with raised eyebrows. "Don't," Nora warned. "I didn't say anything." "You were thinking it very loudly." Eva grinned, and despite everything, Nora found herself smiling back. The storm hit that evening with a fury that rattled the windows and howled down the chimney. The children clustered in the main room, the younger ones frightened by the violence of the wind. Nora kept them busy with games and stories, trying to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. The men had made it back just before the worst hit, stumbling and half-frozen and exhausted. Nora served them hot stew and coffee, and they ate gratefully before heading to the bunkhouse. All except Colton, who lingered as the wind screamed outside. "You sure you're all right here?" he asked. "The children aren't too scared?" "We're fine. Though I wouldn't object to some extra firewood brought in, just in case. Already done. Stacked it on the porch this afternoon." He glanced toward the stairs where the children had finally been convinced to go to bed. "They're good kids, Nora. You've raised them well." "I've done my best, though there were times—" She trailed off, not wanting to voice the fears that still haunted her quiet moments. "Times you weren't sure you could keep them safe," Colton finished softly. "Times you wondered if your best would be enough." "Yes, it was. It is." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Nora, about last night, about what I told you, you don't need to explain anything. I want to. I need you to understand that I don't have expectations. When I offered you this position, it was genuine, nothing more." Nora met his eyes across the room. "I know. Do you?" He took a step closer. "Because sometimes I worry that you think I'm like other men, that I'm waiting for you to feel obligated or grateful enough to—" "I don't think that," Nora interrupted. I did at first. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't suspicious of your motives. But I've watched you, Colton. I've seen how you are with my children, with your men, with me. You're not like other men I've known. You're better. The last word came out barely above a whisper, but in the quiet room it sounded loud. Colton stood very still. Nora. A crash from upstairs made them both jump. Nora rushed up the stairs to find that the wind had blown open a shutter, sending cold air and snow swirling into the girls' room. The twins were crying, and Eva was trying to close the shutter against the force of the wind. "Let me," Colton said, appearing behind Nora. He moved past her and wrestled the shutter closed, latching it securely. Then he checked the other windows while Nora comforted the twins. "All secure now," he said, brushing snow from his hair. Nothing to worry about." "Mr. Colton?" Ruth's small voice was tremulous. "Will the storm blow the house down?" "No, sweetheart. This house has stood through worse storms than this. It'll stand through 100 more. You're safe here, I promise." The simple conviction in his voice calmed the twins immediately. They settled back into bed, and Nora tucked them in with a prayer of gratitude for this man who knew exactly what frightened children needed to hear. Downstairs, Colton prepared to brave the storm back to the bunkhouse. Nora handed him his coat and hat, their fingers brushing in the exchange. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. Stay warm. I'll check on you in the morning." He disappeared into the howling darkness, and Nora stood at the window watching until she could no longer see his lantern through the blowing snow. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of being trapped inside with 6 restless children. 3 days of wind that never seemed to stop. 3 days of snow piling higher and higher against the windows. But the house stayed warm, the food held out, and the children, after the initial excitement wore off, settled into the enforced captivity with reasonable grace. Eva read every book in Colton's study twice. James built elaborate structures from firewood. The twins played endless games of make-believe. Samuel drew pictures on every scrap of paper Nora could find. And Levi napped, ate, and generally wreaked the small havoc that 3-year-olds specialized in. Colton checked on them twice a day, fighting his way through the drifts to make sure they had everything they needed. Each time he appeared at the door, snow-covered and half-frozen, Nora's heart did a small flip she couldn't quite suppress. On the 3rd day, the wind finally died. Nora woke to an eerie silence and looked out to see a world transformed. Snow covered everything in deep drifts, pure white, and pristine in the morning sun. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Beautiful because of its stark loveliness, terrifying because she knew how much work it represented. "Mama, look!" James pressed his face to the window. "I can't even see the fence." "The men will dig it out," Nora assured him. "That's what they're paid for." But when Colton and his crew began the massive task of digging out, James begged to help. And then Eva wanted to help too, and suddenly all the older children were bundled up and outside wielding small shovels and doing their best to contribute. Nora watched from the window as Colton worked alongside her children, patient and encouraging, showing James the most efficient way to move snow, praising Eva's determination, making sure none of them overexerted themselves. He looked up once and caught her watching, and the smile he gave her was so warm it could have melted every snowdrift in Montana. That night, exhausted children ate dinner and fell into bed without argument. The men had worked themselves nearly to collapse and headed to the bunkhouse early. And Nora found herself alone in the quiet house with Colton, who had stayed to discuss some household matters she'd already forgotten. They sat at the big table with coffee, the lamplight soft around them, and for a moment neither spoke. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that only came with growing familiarity. "Your children worked hard today," Colton said finally. "You should be proud." "I am, though I'm not sure help is quite the right word for what the little ones accomplished." Colton chuckled. "Maybe not, but they tried. That counts for something. You're good with them, with all of them. They're easy to be good with." He paused, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "I think about the child Sarah and I lost sometimes. Wonder what he or she would have been like. Would have been about James's age now." Nora's heart ached for him. "You'll never stop wondering. That's part of being a parent, even to a child you never got to meet." "Is it hard? Being around my grief when you're dealing with your own?" The question surprised her with its perceptiveness. Sometimes, she admitted, but not in the way you might think. Your grief is honest, clean. You loved someone and lost them through tragedy. My situation is messier, complicated. You loved your husband once. I thought I did. Now I wonder if I ever really knew him. Nora stared into her coffee. He was charming when we met, promised me adventure, a life beyond my small town. I was young and stupid enough to believe him. You weren't stupid, you were hopeful. There's a difference. Is there? Hope that ignores reality seems pretty stupid to me. Hope is never stupid, Nora. It's just sometimes misplaced. Colton reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You deserved better than what Thomas Allen gave you. You deserved a partner, not a burden. Someone who stayed, not someone who ran. The warmth of his hand on hers sent a shiver through Nora that had nothing to do with cold. She should pull away, should maintain the professional distance she'd insisted on. But she didn't want to. Colton, she whispered, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to... This feels dangerous. What feels dangerous? This, us, sitting here like this, talking like this. She finally looked up at him, wanting this. The air between them seemed to thicken. Colton's gray eyes held hers, intense and searching. Do you want this? He asked quietly. Because I need to know, Nora. I need to know if I'm alone and feeling like every time you walk into a room, the air gets lighter. Like every time you smile at me, I'm 17 years old again and terrified. I need to know if you feel it too, or if I'm fooling myself. Nora's breath caught. You're not alone. But you're scared. Terrified, she admitted. Colton, I have 6 children. 6. I'm a woman with more baggage than anyone should reasonably carry. And you're grieving. We're both broken in our own ways. What if we make things worse? What if we make things better? Colton interrupted gently. What if 2 broken people can help each other heal? What if this is exactly what we both need? Or what if we're just lonely and confused and mistaking proximity for something more? Colton was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. I've been lonely for 5 years, Nora, and in all that time, not once did I feel what I feel when I'm near you. This isn't proximity, this is something else. We work together, you're my employer, this could complicate everything. It could, or it could be the best thing that's happened to either of us. He squeezed her hand gently, but I'm not going to push. I'm not going to make you uncomfortable. If you want me to keep my distance, I will. If you want me to never mention this again, I won't. You set the boundaries, Nora. I'll respect them. Nora sat with that for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. She could pull back now, maintain the employer-employee relationship, keep her heart safe behind the walls she'd so carefully built. Or she could take a chance, risk being hurt again, risk hoping again. I can't make any promises, she said slowly. I need time to figure out what I'm feeling, to make sure it's real and not just gratitude or fear of being alone or, I understand, take all the time you need. And the children, they can't know. Not yet. Not until I'm sure. They've been through too much upheaval already. Of course. And we have to be careful, discreet. I won't have people gossiping or thinking poorly of my children because of Nora. Colton's voice was firm but kind. I respect you. I respect your children. Whatever this is between us, we'll handle it the right way. With patience and care, no rushing, no pressure, just seeing where it goes. Nora nodded, feeling some of the tension in her chest ease. Okay, we'll see where it goes. Colton stood to leave but paused beside her chair. For a moment she thought he might kiss her, and her heart hammered with anticipation and fear. But he simply touched her cheek with gentle fingers, his smile soft and understanding. Good night, Nora. Good night, Colton. After he left, Nora sat alone in the lamplight, her fingers touching the place where his hand had been, and wondered what on earth she was doing. The weeks that followed were a study in restrained longing. Nora and Colton maintained their professional relationship in front of the children and ranch hands. But in stolen moments, when he helped her carry water from the pump, when she brought him coffee while he worked on the books, when they happened to be alone in the barn or the kitchen, something hummed between them. An awareness, a promise. Colton courted her in the smallest ways, a wildflower left on the kitchen table, her favorite coffee prepared exactly how she liked it. An extra lantern hung where she did her evening mending so she'd have better light. Nora found herself reciprocating without quite meaning to. She made his favorite biscuits more often. She mended his shirts with extra care. She smiled at him across the dinner table in ways that made his eyes warm. The children noticed, of course. Children always noticed. "Mama's happy," she heard Samuel tell the twins one afternoon. "She smiles more now." "Mr. Colton smiles more too," Rebecca observed, "especially when Mama's around." Eva said nothing, but Nora caught her daughter watching them with those perceptive eyes, and knew the girl was drawing her own conclusions. It was James who finally asked directly, cornering Nora in the kitchen one morning while she was kneading bread. "Mama, are you and Mr. Colton going to get married?" Nora's hand stilled in the dough. "What makes you ask that?" "Because he looks at you the way Papa never did. And you look at him like he makes you happy. So I wondered if maybe you'd get married and he'd be our new Papa." "James, sweetheart, it's not that simple. I was married to your father. I can't just— Papa left us. He's not coming back. You said so." The blunt statement, delivered in her 7-year-old son's matter-of-fact voice, hit harder than expected. "That's true. But marriage is complicated, and I have to think about all of you, not just what I might want." James tilted his head, studying her. "Don't you think we want you to be happy, Mama?" Nora blinked back sudden tears. "That's very sweet, James. But what makes me happy isn't always what's best for you children. Mr. Colton would be good to us. He already is good to us. He teaches me about horses and doesn't get mad when I make mistakes. He gave Eva all those books. He plays with Levi even when he's tired. That's what papas are supposed to do, isn't it?" Out of the mouths of children came a wisdom Nora hadn't expected. James was right. Colton already treated her children with more care and patience than Thomas ever had. "You really like Mr. Colton?" she asked softly. "I love him, Mama. We all do. Even Eva, though she doesn't say it." James wrapped his small arms around her waist. "And he loves you. I can tell." "Oh, sweetheart." Nora held her son close, her heart full and breaking at the same time. "It's not quite that simple." "Why not? You love him too, don't you?" Did she? Nora had been so careful not to name what she felt, so cautious about letting herself fall. But standing there in the kitchen with her son's arms around her and the truth hanging in the air, she couldn't deny it anymore. Yes, she loved Colton Reyes. She loved his quiet strength and his gentle hands. She loved the way he listened when she talked and remembered small things she mentioned in passing. She loved how he made her children laugh and feel safe. She loved his patience with her fears and his respect for her boundaries. She loved him. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "I might," she whispered to James. "I might love him." "Then tell him, Mama. Tell him so he knows." If only it were that simple. That evening, after the children were in bed, Nora found Colton in the barn checking on Grace. The mare had fully recovered from her bout of colic and was as sleek and healthy as ever. "She's beautiful," Nora said, announcing her presence. Colton turned, surprise and pleasure crossing his face. "Nora, I didn't expect to see you out here. I needed to talk to you, away from the house." Something in her tone made him immediately attentive. "Is something wrong?" "No. Maybe. I don't know." Nora took a deep breath. "James asked me today if we're going to get married." Colton went very still. "What did you tell him?" "I told him it's complicated. But the truth is, Colton, I don't know if it is complicated, or if I'm making it complicated because I'm scared." "Scared of what?" "Of being hurt again, of making another mistake, of loving someone who'll leave." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Thomas broke something in me when he left. He made me feel worthless and unwanted and like I was the problem. And I know you're not him. I know you're different, but what if I'm not? What if I'm still the same broken person who drove him away?" "Nora." Colton crossed to her and took both her hands in his. "Listen to me. You didn't drive Thomas away. His leaving had nothing to do with you and everything to do with his own weaknesses. You are strong and capable and kind and so beautiful it takes my breath away sometimes. You're not broken, you're not worthless, and anyone who made you feel that way was a damn fool. You can't know that. You didn't know me before. I know you now. That's enough. His grip tightened on her hands. Nora, I love you. I've loved you since you stood in that cabin doorway holding a knife behind your back and pretending you weren't terrified. I loved you when you saved Grace's life. I loved you when you made me feel like this house could be a home again. And I love you now, standing here telling me all the reasons you're not good enough when you're the best thing that's happened to me in 5 years. Nora felt tears sliding down her cheeks. Colton, I know it's too soon. I know you need more time. I'll wait, Nora. I'll wait as long as it takes because you're worth waiting for. But I need you to know that what I feel for you isn't proximity or gratitude or confusion. It's love. Pure and simple and terrifying as hell, but love nonetheless. I love you too, Nora whispered. That's what scares me. I love you, and I don't know how to do that anymore. I don't know how to trust it. Colton released one of her hands and cupped her face, his thumb brushing away her tears. Then let me show you. Let me prove that I'm not going anywhere. Let me be the man you deserve, Nora, the man your children deserve. They asked if you were going to be their new papa. What do you want me to be? Nora looked into his gray eyes and saw her future there, saw safety and warmth and love, saw a man who would stay, who would fight for them, who would choose them every single day. I want you to be whatever you want to be, she said. If that's just my employer, I'll learn to live with it. If it's my friend, I'll cherish that. And if it's more, I want more, Colton said firmly. I want everything, Nora. I want to marry you. I want to be a father to your children. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're beside me and go to sleep every night grateful for another day together. I want to build a life with you, a real life, full of all the messy, beautiful chaos that comes with a family. We barely know each other. It's only been 2 months. I've known you long enough to know I want to spend the rest of my life knowing you better. He smiled slightly. But I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm just asking you to think about it, to consider the possibility that maybe we both deserve a second chance at happiness. Nora stood in the warm barn with his hands on her face and let herself imagine it. Marriage to Colton, a real family, a future built on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty. It was terrifying. It was wonderful. It was everything she'd stopped letting herself want. Ask me again in the spring, she heard herself say. When the snow melts and the world wakes up, ask me then, and I'll give you an answer. Colton's smile was brilliant. Spring it is, then. He leaned down slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and kissed her forehead with such tenderness that Nora felt something inside her crack open. Not breaking, but blooming. The careful walls she'd built around her heart developing their first fragile fissures. I should get back to the house, she whispered, before the children wake and wonder where I am. Of course. But Colton didn't immediately release her. Instead, he pulled her into a gentle embrace, and Nora let herself sink into it, let herself feel safe and wanted and cherished in a way she couldn't remember ever feeling before. When she finally pulled away and walked back through the snow to the house, she felt lighter than she had in years. Behind her, she could feel Colton watching, making sure she got safely inside. And for the first time since Thomas had abandoned her, Nora allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of her life were still ahead of her. Winter deepened its grip on Montana, but inside the walls of Copper Ridge Ranch, warmth bloomed in ways that had nothing to do with the fire in the hearth. Nora moved through her days with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The promise she'd made to Colton to give him an answer in spring hung between them like a golden thread, connecting them even when they were apart. She caught herself humming while she cooked, smiling at nothing, touching the place on her forehead where he'd kissed her that night in the barn. The children noticed the change in her, though they didn't fully understand its source. They were simply happy to see their mother happy, to hear her laugh freely, to watch the worry lines that had etched themselves around her eyes begin to soften. Eva, perceptive as always, understood more than the younger ones. She'd taken to watching Colton and her mother with a small, knowing smile that made Nora both grateful and nervous. But when Nora finally worked up the courage to talk to her eldest daughter about it, Eva's response surprised her. Mama, the 10-year-old said seriously, setting down the book she'd been reading, I'm glad you're happy. And Mr. Colton is a good man. Better than Papa ever was. It's true, Mama. I remember things the little ones don't. I remember Papa yelling. I remember him coming home smelling like whiskey. I remember you crying when you thought we were asleep. Eva's young face was solemn. Mr. Colton doesn't do any of those things. He's kind. He's patient. He actually wants to be here with us. Nora pulled her daughter into her arms, blinking back tears. You're too young to have to think about such things. But I do think about them. And so do you. Eva pulled back and looked up at her mother. You deserve to be happy, Mama. We all do. And if Mr. Colton makes you happy, then that's what matters. Out of the mouths of babes, Nora thought, came a wisdom that shamed her own doubts. But those doubts still lingered, especially late at night when the house was quiet and she was alone with her thoughts. What if she was rushing into this? What if Colton's feelings changed once the novelty wore off? What if her children grew to resent him? What if Thomas came back and... That last thought made her pause. What if Thomas came back? Legally, she was still married to him. He'd abandoned them, yes, but that didn't dissolve the marriage. If he returned and demanded his rights as her husband, what would happen? Could she refuse him? Would the law even be on her side? The questions plagued her until one evening, when Colton stayed late to discuss the spring planting schedule, she finally voiced her fears. Colton, I need to ask you something about Thomas. His expression grew guarded. All right. I'm still legally married to him. Even though he left, even though he took everything, in the eyes of the law, I'm still his wife. She twisted her hands in her apron. What happens if he comes back? What happens to us? Colton was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. Has he tried to contact you? No, not since the letter he left when he ran, but that doesn't mean he won't. And if he does, we deal with it. Colton's voice was firm. Nora, Montana has abandonment laws. A man who deserts his wife and children for more than a year can be grounds for legal separation, even divorce. If Thomas comes back, and I don't think he will, but if he does, we have options. You've looked into this. Of course I have. Did you think I'd tell you I love you? Tell you I want to marry you without considering the practical obstacles? He moved closer. Nora, I meant what I said. I want a future with you. That means I need to make sure that future is possible. Relief flooded through her, followed quickly by something else. Gratitude, yes, but also a deepening of the love she already felt. Colton wasn't just offering pretty words and empty promises. He was thinking ahead, planning, making sure he could protect her and her children. Thank you, she whispered, for thinking of everything I'm too scared to think about. You're not scared. You're cautious. There's a difference. He reached out and took her hand. And your caution is what's kept you and your children alive this long. Don't apologize for it. Their hands remained clasped, and Nora found herself studying his face in the lamplight, the lines around his eyes, the weathered skin, the gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was a handsome man, but it was more than that. His face showed character, strength, kindness earned through suffering. What are you thinking? He asked softly. That I'm lucky. That my children are lucky. That if Thomas hadn't left us, I never would have found you. Don't give him credit for something good, Nora. He didn't do you a favor by abandoning you. He just got out of the way so something better could happen. The simple reframing shifted something in Nora's perspective. She'd been thinking of Thomas's departure as the worst thing that had happened to her, but maybe Colton was right. Maybe it was just the necessary clearing of space for something infinitely better. I'm still scared, she admitted, but I'm less scared than I was. That's progress. Colton squeezed her hand gently. And I'll take whatever progress you can give me. January melted into February, and with it came Valentine's Day. Nora had never paid much attention to the holiday. Thomas had always dismissed it as foolish sentiment, but the children were excited about it, having learned about the tradition from one of Colton's ranch hands. Can we make Valentines, Mama? Rebecca asked, her eyes bright. Tom says you give them to people you love. I suppose we could, Nora said, already mentally cataloging what materials they had. Paper was scarce, but she could spare some, and the children could draw their own decorations. The kitchen table became a crafting station. The children cut hearts from precious paper, drew elaborate designs, practiced their letters as they wrote messages. Eva helped the younger ones, her patience with her siblings endless. Nora watched them work and felt her heart swell. This simple, joyful domesticity was what she'd always wanted for them. Not wealth or luxury, but safety and love and the freedom to be children. "Who are you making yours for, Mama?" Samuel asked, looking up from his careful lettering. "I'm not making one, sweetheart. I'm just helping you." "But you should make one too, for Mr. Colton." The suggestion made Nora's cheeks warm. "I don't think Mr. Colton expects—" "Please, Mama." Levi climbed into her lap, his small face pleading. "Mr. Colton is nice. He should get a Valentine." How could she refuse? Nora found herself cutting out a heart, feeling ridiculously like a schoolgirl. What did one write to a man who'd offered marriage but was waiting patiently for an answer? What message could possibly convey the tangled mess of gratitude and fear and growing love in her heart? In the end, she kept it simple. "Thank you for showing us that home is more than a place. It's a feeling. It's you." She folded it quickly before she could second-guess herself and tucked it into her apron pocket. Valentine's Day arrived cold and clear. The children distributed their creations at breakfast, giving Valentines to each other and to Colton's ranch hands, who accepted them with gruff pleasure. Jim Torres actually looked misty-eyed when Levi handed him a lopsided heart covered in scribbles. "This is the finest Valentine I ever received, young man," Jim said solemnly, making Levi beam with pride. Colton received 6 Valentines from the children, each one unique and heartfelt. He read them all carefully, thanking each child individually, and Nora saw his eyes grow bright with emotion he was trying to hide. Later, when the children were occupied with their lessons and the ranch hands had returned to work, Colton found Nora in the kitchen preparing dinner. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small package from his coat pocket. "Colton, you didn't need to. I wanted to." He handed her the package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Inside, Nora found a pair of leather gloves. Not rough work gloves, but fine ones, soft and supple, clearly made by a skilled craftsman. They were beautiful and practical and must have cost more than she wanted to think about. "Your hands were getting chapped from the cold," Colton said, almost shyly. "I noticed you didn't have proper gloves." "Colton, these are too much." "They're not enough, but they're what I could give you without making you uncomfortable." He paused. Did you make a Valentine?" "The children said you did, but I didn't receive one." Nora felt her cheeks flame. "I did, but it's silly, childish. I'd like to see it anyway, if you're willing to share." With trembling fingers, Nora pulled the folded heart from her apron pocket and handed it to him. She couldn't watch as he opened it, couldn't bear to see his reaction. She busied herself with the potatoes she'd been peeling, her heart hammering. "Nora," his voice was rough with emotion, "look at me." She turned reluctantly and found him staring at the Valentine with an expression that made her breath catch. "You're right," he said softly. "Home is a feeling, and I haven't felt at home, truly at home, since Sarah died. Not until you and your children arrived and brought this house back to life." He crossed to her and took her flower-dusted hands in his gloved ones. "I know you asked me to wait until spring for your answer, but I need you to know that whether you say yes or no, you and your children will always have a place here. This is your home, Nora, for as long as you want it to be. And if I say yes, if I agree to marry you, then this becomes our home. Not mine, not yours, but ours. A place we build together." The sincerity in his eyes undid something in Nora's carefully maintained composure. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the scratch of his stubble against her palm. "I'm not going to say no," she whispered. "When spring comes and you ask me properly, my answer will be yes." Colton's eyes widened. "You're sure?" "I'm terrified, but I'm sure." She smiled tremulously. "You've shown me what love should look like, Colton, patient and kind and steadfast. You've shown my children what a father should be. How could I say no to that?" "Nora." He said her name like a prayer, and then he was pulling her close, holding her like she was precious, and breakable, and exactly what he'd been waiting for. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms in the warm kitchen, and Nora felt the last of her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. But their peace was short-lived. The letter arrived in early March, carried by a rider from town who'd fought through late winter snow to deliver the mail. Colton brought it to the house with a grim expression. "It's from Thomas," he said, handing her the envelope. Nora's hand shook as she opened it. The handwriting was her husband's, but messier than she remembered, as if written in haste or while drunk. "Nora," the letter began, with no endearment, no apology. "I hear you've been living at Copper Ridge Ranch. I hear Colton Reyes has been providing for you and the children. That's good. You always were resourceful. But I'm writing to inform you that I'm coming back to Montana. I've had time to think about things, and I've decided I want my family back. I'll be there by April. Make sure you and the children are ready to leave with me. We'll start fresh somewhere new. Thomas." The paper slipped from Nora's fingers and drifted to the floor. "He's coming back," she whispered. He thinks we're just going to go with him, like nothing happened, like he didn't abandon us to starve." Colton's jaw was tight with barely controlled anger. "Over my dead body. He's still my husband, Colton. Legally, he has rights. He forfeited those rights when he left you with 6 children and no resources." Colton picked up the letter and read it, his expression darkening with each word. "This man is delusional if he thinks you're going anywhere with him. But what if the law says I have to? Then we fight the law. Nora, listen to me." He took her shoulders gently. "I will not let him take you. I will not let him take those children. We'll get a lawyer. We'll petition for divorce on grounds of abandonment. We'll do whatever it takes. That costs money, a lot of money. I don't care. You're worth it. They're worth it." Nora felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "What if we fight and lose? What if he takes them anyway?" "He won't. I promise you, Nora, he won't." Colton pulled her against his chest. "But we need to act fast. I'm riding to town tomorrow to speak with a lawyer. We'll start the legal proceedings immediately." He said April. That's only a few weeks away. Then we have a few weeks to prepare. And when he shows up here, he'll find out that his abandoned family has a protector, one who won't be bullied or intimidated. Despite Colton's confidence, fear settled into Nora's bones and wouldn't leave. She found herself jumping at every sound, watching the road anxiously, dreading the moment when Thomas would appear. The children sensed her distress, though she tried to hide it. Eva was the first to ask directly, "Mama, is something wrong? You've been sad since that letter came." Nora debated lying, then decided her children deserved the truth. She gathered them all in the main room one evening after supper and told them as gently as she could that their father was planning to return. The reaction was not what she expected. James's face went pale. "Do we have to go with him?" The twins started crying. Samuel buried his face in Nora's lap. Even Levi, who barely remembered Thomas, picked up on the distress and whimpered. Only Eva remained calm, though her jaw was set in a way that reminded Nora painfully of herself. "We're not going," Eva said firmly. "We're staying here with Mr. Colton. This is our home now." "It's not that simple, sweetheart. Your father is still your father. He has legal rights. He lost his rights when he left us." Eva's voice rose, rare anger sparking in her eyes. "He doesn't get to come back and take us away from the first place we've been happy and safe. It's not fair." "I know it's not fair, Eva, but sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes we have to do hard things, even when we don't want to." "Then fight him, Mama!" James joined in, his 7-year-old voice fierce. "Mr. Colton will help you. He said he would protect us. He promised." "I can't ask Mr. Colton to." "You don't have to ask." Colton's voice came from the doorway. None of them had heard him come in. "I already told you I'd fight for you, for all of you, and I meant it." He crossed the room and knelt in front of the children. "Listen to me, all of you. I know you're scared. I know the idea of your father coming back is frightening, but I want you to understand something. You are not alone. Your mother is not alone. We're going to fight this together, and we're going to win." "How can you be sure?" Rebecca asked, her small voice wavering. "Because I have something your father doesn't, a reason to stay. I love your mother. I love all of you. And people who love each other fight for each other. That's what families do." "Are you our family now?" Levi asked, climbing into Colton's lap with the fearless trust of a 3-year-old. Colton looked at Nora, a question in his eyes. She nodded, giving him permission to speak the truth they'd been dancing around for months. I want to be, Colton said softly. I want to marry your mother and be a proper father to all of you. Not to replace the father you had, but to be the father you deserve. If you'll have me. Yes. The answer came from all 6 children simultaneously, even Eva, whose eyes were bright with tears. Colton looked up at Nora again, and she saw her own emotions reflected in his face. Love, fear, determination, hope, all tangled together in a mess that was somehow beautiful. Then it's settled, he said. We're a family, and we protect our own. That night, after the children were finally settled in bed, reassured and calmer, though still anxious, Nora and Colton sat together in the kitchen making plans. I spoke with the lawyer today, Colton said. He thinks we have a strong case for legal separation, possibly even divorce. Thomas's abandonment, combined with his failure to provide any support, gives us solid grounds, but the process takes time. Time we don't have if he arrives in April. Which is why we're also preparing a contingency plan. If Thomas shows up before the legal proceedings are complete, we'll refuse to let him take you or the children. If he tries to force the issue, we'll involve the sheriff. What if the sheriff sides with him? What if the law says a husband has the right to his wife and children, regardless of abandonment? Colton's expression hardened. Then we leave. I'll sell the ranch if I have to. We'll go somewhere Thomas can't find you, somewhere you and the children will be safe. You'd give up everything you've built here? For us? Without hesitation. He took her hands. Nora, this ranch is just land and buildings. It's not worth anything without people to share it with. You and your children have made this place a home again. You're what matters, not the property. Nora felt tears spill over. How are you real? How did I get this lucky? Lucky? You fought your way through hell to get here. You kept 6 children alive on nothing but determination and hope. That's not luck, Nora. That's strength. And it's an honor to stand beside you. She kissed him then, unable to help herself. It was their first real kiss. Not a chaste touch to the forehead, but a real kiss. Desperate and tender and full of all the words they hadn't yet said. Colton responded with gentle passion, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nora rested her forehead against his. Spring can't come fast enough, she whispered. Then we'll make our own spring. Colton smiled. Tomorrow. I'm not waiting for perfect weather or perfect circumstances. Tomorrow I'm asking you properly, and if you say yes, we'll be married as soon as we can arrange it. Before Thomas arrives? Before Thomas arrives. Let him show up to find you married to someone else. Let him see that you've moved on, that you're protected, that he has no power over you anymore. The idea was audacious and terrifying and absolutely perfect. Ask me now, Nora said. Don't wait for tomorrow. Colton stood and pulled her to her feet. Then, to her surprise, he dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen, still holding her hands. Nora Allen, he said, his voice steady and sure. You are the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. Your children are a gift I never thought I'd receive. You've brought light and life and love back into my world, and I can't imagine a future without you in it. Will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and a father to your children? Will you build a life with me here at Copper Ridge or anywhere else in the world you want to go? Nora looked down at this good man, this patient man, this man who'd offered her everything and asked for nothing in return except the chance to love her. Yes, she said, the word coming out clear and strong. Yes, Colton Reyes, I'll marry you. I'll build a life with you. I'll trust you with my heart and my children and our future. Yes to all of it. Colton surged to his feet and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around in the kitchen while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, they were both grinning like fools. How soon can we do this? Nora asked. How soon can we be married? The circuit judge comes through town in 2 weeks. If we can get the license before then, he can marry us. 2 weeks. That's cutting it close if Thomas arrives in April. Then we'll make it work. I'll ride to town tomorrow and file for the license. We'll get everything arranged. He paused. Unless you want a big wedding? A proper celebration? Nora thought of the dress she didn't have. the guests she couldn't invite, the ceremony she couldn't afford. Then she thought of what really mattered, standing before God and witnesses and promising herself to this man. "I don't need big," she said. "I just need you and our children and a future together." "Then that's what you'll have." Colton pulled her close again. "I love you, Nora. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes. I already know I won't regret it. You're the best decision I've ever made." They stood together in the quiet kitchen, holding each other, and outside the window the Montana winter began its slow transformation toward spring. The snow was melting. The days were getting longer, and inside the walls of Copper Ridge Ranch, something new was being born. Hope, family, love, the things that mattered most. The 2 weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Colton rode to town the very next morning and returned with the marriage license tucked safely in his coat pocket, his face triumphant. The circuit judge would indeed be passing through, and he'd agreed to perform the ceremony at Copper Ridge Ranch itself, saving them the journey to town with 6 children in tow. 2 weeks from Saturday, Colton announced at dinner that evening, we'll be married right here, in the house, with everyone we care about as witnesses. The children erupted in excited chatter. Even the ranch hands, who'd been let in on the secret, offered their congratulations with genuine warmth. Jim Torres smiled so broadly his weathered face looked 10 years younger. "About time, boss," Jim said, clapping Colton on the shoulder. "About damn time." Nora felt herself blushing under the attention, but she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the future stretched out before her bright with possibility instead of shadowed with fear. But the shadow of Thomas's impending arrival still loomed. Even as Nora threw herself into wedding preparations, such as they were, given their limited resources and time, she found herself watching the road, tensing at unexpected sounds, wondering when her past would come crashing into her present. "He might not come," Eva said one afternoon, helping her mother take in the wash. "Papa was good at making promises he didn't keep." "I know, sweetheart, but we have to prepare as if he will." "Are you scared?" Nora considered lying, then decided against it. "A little. But I'm also ready. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. All of us." Eva nodded, her young face serious. "Mr. Colton won't let him hurt us." "No, he won't." The certainty in her own voice surprised Nora. Just months ago, she wouldn't have trusted any man to protect her. Now she trusted Colton with everything that mattered: her children, her heart, her future. The wedding preparations were simple but heartfelt. Nora had no fancy dress, but the ranch hands' wives from neighboring properties, hearing of the upcoming nuptials, appeared one afternoon with fabric and willing hands. Within days, they'd sewn her a simple but beautiful dress in soft blue wool that brought out the color of her eyes. "You look like a princess, Mama," Rebecca breathed, watching Nora try on the finished garment. "I look like a very fortunate woman," Nora corrected gently, but when she caught her reflection in the small mirror Colton had hung in the bedroom, she hardly recognized herself. The gaunt, frightened woman who'd arrived at Copper Ridge Ranch had been replaced by someone with color in her cheeks, light in her eyes, and hope in her heart. The children were beside themselves with excitement. James had asked Colton if he could call him Papa after the wedding, and when Colton had said yes with tears in his eyes, the boy had nearly burst with joy. The twins spent hours making decorations from whatever materials they could find: paper flowers, strings of dried berries, anything to make the house festive. Samuel practiced the song he wanted to sing during the ceremony, and Levi simply ran around telling everyone who would listen that his mama was getting married to Mr. Colton, and they were going to be a real family. Even in the midst of joy, Nora found herself making contingency plans. She packed a small bag with essential items, documents, a little money Colton had insisted she keep, warm clothes for the children, and hid it in the back of the wardrobe. Just in case. Just in case Thomas arrived early and they needed to flee. Just in case everything went wrong. Colton found her one evening, staring at the packed bag with tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "What's this?" "I'm sorry. I know it shows I don't trust that everything will work out. I know it means I'm still scared, but I can't help it. I need to know that if things go badly, I can get them to safety." "Nora," Colton took her face in his hands. This doesn't show lack of trust. It shows you're a mother who will do anything to protect her children. That's not weakness. That's strength. I don't feel strong. I feel terrified. You can be both. The bravest people I know are the ones who are scared but do the hard thing anyway. He kissed her forehead. But I promise you, Nora, you won't need that bag. When Thomas shows up, if he shows up, he'll find a united front, a family, a home he has no part in anymore. What if he fights? What if he tries to take them by force? Then he'll learn very quickly that there are 8 armed ranch hands on this property who are very protective of their family, and a sheriff in town who's already been briefed on the situation and is prepared to intervene if necessary. Nora blinked. You talked to the sheriff? Of course I did. I told you I'm not leaving anything to chance. The sheriff knows about Thomas's abandonment. He knows about our upcoming marriage. And he knows that if Thomas Allen shows up and tries to cause trouble, we'll need legal intervention. Colton smiled grimly. The sheriff is not a fan of men who abandon their families. He's on our side. Some of the tension in Nora's chest eased. You've thought of everything. I'm trying to, because you and those children are the most important things in my life, and I'll be damned if I let anyone threaten what we're building. The day before the wedding, Nora woke with a strange mixture of excitement and dread sitting heavy in her stomach. Tomorrow she would marry Colton Reyes. Tomorrow she would officially become part of his family, and he would become part of hers. Tomorrow, everything would change. She moved through the day in a haze, preparing food for the small celebration they'd planned, helping the children with their final preparations, trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong. It was late afternoon when Jim came running to the house, his face grim. Mrs. Allen, he said, slightly out of breath. There's a rider coming, from the south. Nora's blood turned to ice. Is it? Can't tell yet. But Colton wants you and the children inside, just as a precaution. Nora gathered her children quickly, herding them into the house with a calm she didn't feel. Through the window, she could see Colton and his ranch hands assembling in the yard, a human barrier between the house and whoever was approaching. Mama, I'm scared, Samuel whispered, pressing against her side. I know, sweetheart, but Mr. Colton won't let anything bad happen. I promise. Eva appeared at her shoulder. Is it Papa? I don't know yet. They waited. The tension in the room thick enough to cut. Nora could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel the weight of 6 pairs of eyes looking to her for reassurance she wasn't sure she could give. Then, through the window, she saw the rider come into view. A single man on a tired horse slouched in the saddle with the posture of someone who'd been traveling hard. It was Thomas. Even from a distance, even after all these months, Nora recognized him, the set of his shoulders, the shape of his hat, the way he sat his horse, her husband, the man she'd once loved, the man who'd destroyed everything. Stay here, she told the children. No matter what happens, you stay in this house. Eva, you're in charge. Keep the little ones upstairs. Mama, no. Eva, please. I need to know you're all safe. Can you do that for me? Eva's jaw set stubbornly, but she nodded. Yes, ma'am. Nora took a deep breath, smoothed down her apron, and walked out onto the porch. Colton stood at the bottom of the steps, his ranch hands flanking him in a semicircle. They looked like an army, united and immovable. Thomas reined in his horse about 20 feet away, taking in the scene with eyes that were redder and more haggard than Nora remembered. He'd aged badly in the months since he'd left. His clothes were dirty, his face unshaven, his hands shaking slightly as he dismounted. Nora, he said, and even his voice sounded different, harder, more desperate. I got your message. I didn't send you any message. The letter I sent. You didn't respond. That's message enough. He took a step forward, and immediately Colton and his men shifted, blocking his path. Thomas's eyes narrowed. What's this? You got yourself a new man already? Didn't take you long to replace me. You left us to starve, Nora said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. You took everything and ran. You have no right to judge what I did to survive. I'm your husband. I got every right. Thomas's voice rose. Now get the children and let's go. I've got a new opportunity in California, and we're going to start fresh. No. The single word hung in the air like a gunshot. Thomas's face darkened. What did you say? I said no. We're not going with you. Not now. Not ever. Like hell you're not. You're my wife. Those are my children. You'll do as I say. Those children, Colton said quietly, stepping forward, are under my protection now, as is their mother, and you're not taking them anywhere. Thomas's attention swung to Colton, his eyes narrowing with recognition. Reyes, I heard about you. Heard you've been playing house with my family while I was gone. But fun time's over. Nora and the kids are coming with me. Mrs. Allen has made her choice. She's staying here, with me. Mrs. Allen is my wife. Not for long. Colton's voice was hard as iron. We've filed for legal separation based on abandonment. The paperwork is already in motion. And tomorrow, the day after the separation is finalized, Nora and I are getting married. The blood drained from Thomas's face. You can't do that. She's already married. To me. A marriage you dissolved when you left her and 6 children with nothing but a coward's note. Colton took another step forward, and Nora could see the barely controlled anger in every line of his body. You gave up your rights as a husband and father the moment you rode away. Nora owes you nothing. Those children owe you nothing. The law says different. The law says a man's wife and children belong to him. The law also says a man who abandons his family for over 6 months loses his claim to them. I checked. I've got lawyers who checked. You have no legal standing here, Alan. Thomas's face twisted with rage. I don't give a damn about lawyers. Those are my children. No, Nora said, her voice ringing out clear and strong. They're not. Not anymore. You lost that privilege when you chose money over family, when you chose yourself over them. You don't get to come back now and claim what you threw away. Nora, please. Thomas's tone changed, becoming wheedling. I made a mistake. I see that now. But we can fix this. We can be a family again. Don't I deserve a second chance? You deserve exactly what you gave us. Nothing. Thomas lunged forward, trying to push past Colton to reach the porch. Immediately, Jim and 2 other ranch hands grabbed him, holding him back while he struggled. Let me go! Nora, tell them! Tell them you're my wife! I was your wife, Nora said, and she was surprised by how calm she felt, how clear. I was your wife when you promised to love and cherish me. I was your wife when I bore you 6 children. I was your wife when I begged you to stay, to try, to be the man I thought you were. But you stopped being my husband the moment you abandoned us. You made your choice, Thomas. Now I'm making mine. You can't do this. She already has, Colton said. And if you try to force the issue, the sheriff is waiting in town with a warrant for your arrest on charges of child abandonment. Your choice is simple. Ride away now and never come back, or spend the next few years in jail. What's it going to be? Thomas stopped struggling, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. Nora could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to find an angle. You'll regret this, he spat finally. Both of you. She's used goods, Reyes, 6 brats and more trouble than she's worth. You'll figure that out soon enough. The only thing I regret, Colton said coldly, is not finding her sooner. Now get off my property before I let my men throw you off. For a long moment, Thomas just stood there, held between 2 ranch hands, his face a mask of impotent fury. Then finally, he wrenched himself free and stumbled back to his horse. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is. Nora's voice was final. Goodbye, Thomas. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, but you won't find it here. Thomas mounted his horse, yanked the reins viciously, and galloped away without looking back. Nora watched him disappear over the horizon, and with his departure, she felt something inside her release. The last thread connecting her to her old life, the last chain of obligation and fear, snapped cleanly. She was free. Her legs suddenly gave out, and she sat down hard on the porch steps. Colton was beside her in an instant, his arm around her shoulders. You all right? I think so. I can't believe he's really gone. He's gone. And he's not coming back. Not after that. Colton pressed a kiss to her temple. You were magnificent, by the way. So strong. So certain. I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified. Like I said, the bravest people are the ones who are scared but do it anyway. The door behind them burst open and 6 children came tumbling out, all talking at once. "Mama, is he gone? Are we safe? You told him no. Can we stay?" Nora gathered them close, all 6 of them pressing against her, and felt tears streaming down her face. But these were good tears, happy tears. "We're safe," she said. "We're staying. We're home." "Forever?" Levi asked, his small voice hopeful. Nora looked up at Colton, who was smiling down at all of them with such love in his eyes it took her breath away. "Forever," she promised. That night, after the children were finally settled and asleep, still buzzing with excitement and relief, Nora found Colton on the porch, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Can't sleep?" she asked, joining him. "Too much to think about. Tomorrow's a big day." "Having second thoughts?" "Not even for a second." He pulled her close. "You?" "No. For the first time in my life, I'm completely certain about something." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you for standing up to Thomas, for protecting us, for giving us a future." "You gave me a future too, Nora. You brought this place back to life, brought me back to life." They stood together in the quiet Montana night, and Nora thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear and desperation, the long winter of uncertainty, the slow blooming of hope and love. She thought about the woman she'd been, broken and frightened and convinced she was worthless. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, strong and loved and ready to build something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "we start over." "Tomorrow," Colton agreed, "we begin." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, with the first real warmth of spring in the air. Nora woke early, her stomach full of butterflies, and found the house already bustling with activity. The neighboring ranch wives had arrived at dawn, bringing food for the celebration and eager hands to help with final preparations. They shooed Nora upstairs to get ready while they took over the kitchen, filling the house with the scent of baking bread and roasting meat. Eva helped her mother dress, her small fingers surprisingly deft with the buttons on the blue wool dress. "You look beautiful, Mama," she said softly. "So do you, sweetheart." Nora touched her daughter's cheek. "Are you happy about this? Truly?" "I'm happier than I've ever been. Mr. Colton, Papa, he's everything I always wanted a father to be, kind and patient, and he actually wants to be here with us." Eva paused. "Do you think he'll really love us? All of us? Forever?" "I know he will. I've seen the way he looks at you children. That's real love, Eva, the kind that doesn't run when things get hard. Like Papa Thomas did." "Yes, but Colton is nothing like Thomas. And you don't have to call Thomas Papa anymore if you don't want to. He's not your father, not in any way that matters." Eva nodded solemnly. Then, surprising Nora, she threw her arms around her mother's waist and held tight. "I love you, Mama, and I'm so glad you're happy." "I love you too, my beautiful girl." By noon, the house was full of people. Ranch hands and their families, neighbors from miles around, all come to witness the union of Colton Reyes and Nora Allen. The circuit judge had arrived, a kindly older man with a white beard who smiled broadly when he saw the gathering. "Nothing I like better than a wedding," he declared, "especially one that's clearly meant to be." The ceremony was simple. Nora and Colton stood before the judge in the main room of the house, with all 6 children gathered around them. James held the ring they'd procured in town, a simple gold band that Colton had bought with such care. The twins held hands, their identical faces solemn and sweet. Samuel stood close to Colton's side, as if already claiming him as father. Levi kept trying to grab the ring from James, prompting quiet giggles from the gathered crowd. And Eva stood beside her mother, her face glowing with quiet joy. The judge spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred nature of marriage, about building a life together on foundations of trust and respect. But Nora barely heard the words. She was too focused on Colton's face, on the way he was looking at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. When it came time for vows, Colton took both her hands in his. "Nora," he said, his voice steady and sure, "I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, I promise to be a father to your children, to all our children, and to give them the stability and love they deserve. I promise to make this house a home full of laughter and warmth, and I promise that I will never, ever leave you. This is my sacred vow. Nora felt tears streaming down her face as she responded, Colton, you saved my life. You saved my children's lives. But more than that, you showed me what love should look like. Patient and kind and steadfast. You've given us a home, not just a place to live, but a place to belong. I promise to love you with everything I am. I promise to be a partner worthy of your faith in me. I promise to build a life with you that honors the second chance we've both been given. And I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. This is my sacred vow. The judge pronounced them husband and wife, and when Colton kissed her, their first kiss as a married couple, the room erupted in cheers and applause. The children surrounded them, all talking at once, and Colton scooped up Levi while keeping one arm around Nora, laughing as the celebration swirled around them. The feast that followed was joyful and boisterous. The ranch hands had brought out their fiddles, and soon there was music and dancing. Nora found herself swept into a dance with Colton, then with Jim, then with each of her children in turn. Even little Levi insisted on dancing with his mama, standing on her feet and giggling as she waltzed him around the room. As evening fell and the party showed no signs of slowing, Nora stepped out onto the porch for a moment of quiet. She looked out at the land stretching before her, this beautiful, harsh Montana territory that had nearly killed her and had ultimately saved her. Colton joined her, sliding his arm around her waist. Happy, Mrs. Reyes? Deliriously, she leaned into him. Is it strange that I feel guilty for being this happy? Like I don't deserve it? You deserve every bit of happiness in the world, Nora. And more. I keep thinking about Thomas. About where he is, what he's doing. Don't. He made his choices, you made yours. His path is his own to walk. I know, I wasted so many years believing I was the problem, believing I wasn't enough. And now I'm standing here, married to an incredible man with 6 beautiful children and a real home, and I can't quite believe it's real. It's real. Colton turned her to face him. This is your life now. Our life. A good life, full of love and laughter and purpose. You don't have to feel guilty for that. How did you get so wise? Years of making mistakes and learning from them. He smiled. But this isn't a mistake. This is exactly right. Inside, someone called for the bride and groom, and they returned to the celebration. The evening passed in a blur of joy, more dancing, more food, more laughter than Nora could remember experiencing in her entire life. As the night grew late and guests began to depart, calling out well wishes and congratulations, Nora put her exhausted children to bed. Each one received a kiss and a whispered, I love you. And by the time she tucked Levi in for the night, she was so full of emotion she could barely speak. Mama? Levi's sleepy voice stopped her at the door. Is Papa Colton staying forever now? Yes, sweetheart, forever. Good. I like having a papa. Downstairs, Colton was banking the fires and tidying the last of the celebration debris. Nora joined him, and they worked in comfortable silence, partners in the everyday tasks of life, just as they were now partners in everything else. The children are all asleep, Nora said finally, happy and exhausted. As they should be. It was a big day. The biggest. Nora paused. Colton, I need to tell you something. He looked up, concern flickering across his face. What is it? I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them. Nora had suspected for a few weeks now, but hadn't been certain until recently. She'd debated when to tell him, had worried about how he'd react to the news that they'd be adding another child to their already full household. Colton's face went through a series of expressions: shock, disbelief, and then pure, radiant joy. There's a baby? Yes, due in early autumn, I think. Nora. He crossed to her in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. That's the most wonderful news. A baby. Our baby. You're not upset? With 6 children already? Upset? Nora, I'm over the moon. A child of our own. A symbol of everything we're building together. He pulled back to look at her face. Are you happy about it? I am. Scared, but happy. It's been 3 years since Levi, and I'm not getting any younger, and you're strong and healthy and surrounded by people who love you. You won't face this alone, Nora. I'll be with you every step of the way. We all will. Tears slipped down Nora's cheeks. How is this my life? 6 months ago, I was starving in a broken-down cabin, convinced we wouldn't survive the winter. And now I'm here, married to you, with a baby on the way, and I'm overwhelmed. That's called happiness, love. Get used to it, because I plan on making sure you feel this way for the rest of your life. They stood together in the quiet house, their home, and Nora marveled at how far she'd come. From abandonment to love, from desperation to security, from a woman who believed she was worthless to a woman who knew she was treasured. I love you, she whispered against Colton's chest. I love you too. You and all our children, every single one. 7 children, Nora said, still marveling at it. We're going to have 7 children. 8, Colton corrected with a grin. Don't forget me. I'm basically a large child who needs constant supervision. Nora laughed, the sound bright and free. Well, at least you're housebroken. Mostly. They laughed together. And then Colton was kissing her, and Nora was kissing him back, and the future stretched out before them, bright with promise. The months that followed were some of the happiest of Nora's life. Spring arrived in full force, transforming the Montana landscape from brown and dormant to green and vibrant. The children thrived under Colton's care. James became his shadow, learning ranching from the ground up. Eva devoured every book in the house and started writing her own stories. The twins helped with the garden and the chickens, developing a surprising talent for coaxing plants to grow. Samuel's shyness began to fade as he found confidence in his new stable home. And Levi followed his papa everywhere, chattering constantly and making everyone laugh. As summer approached and Nora's pregnancy became obvious, the children were beside themselves with excitement at the prospect of a new sibling. They debated names endlessly, argued over whether it would be a boy or a girl, and competed to help prepare the nursery. Colton was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly checking on Nora, insisting she rest more, worrying over every twinge and discomfort. I'm pregnant, not dying, Nora told him one afternoon, laughing as he tried to take a basket of laundry from her hands. I'm perfectly capable of carrying this. I know, He paused, his face growing serious. I lost Sarah and our baby. I can't lose you too, Nora. I can't. You won't. Nora set down the basket and took his face in her hands. I'm healthy. The baby's healthy. Everything is going to be fine. You can't know that. No. But I can trust it. And I can trust that whatever happens, we'll face it together. That's what marriage means, Colton. Together. He pulled her close, careful of her growing belly, and held her like she was infinitely precious, which, she was beginning to understand, was exactly how he saw her. In early October, as the leaves turned gold and the air grew crisp with the promise of winter, Nora went into labor. It was a long labor, nearly 20 hours, and there were moments when Colton's fear was palpable. But the midwife from town was experienced and calm, and Nora was stronger than anyone gave her credit for. Just after dawn on October 7th, Nora delivered a healthy baby girl with a lusty cry and a full head of dark hair. She's perfect, the midwife declared, wrapping the infant in a soft blanket. Absolutely perfect. Colton, who'd been pacing outside the bedroom despite Nora's invitation for him to stay, rushed in the moment he heard the baby's cry. His face when he saw his daughter for the first time was something Nora would treasure forever, wonder and love and barely controlled emotion all mixed together. Our girl, he whispered, carefully taking the baby from Nora's arms. Our beautiful girl. What should we name her? Nora asked, exhausted but radiant. They discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his daughter's face, Colton said softly, Hope. Because that's what you brought back into my life. What you bring into all our lives. Hope. Hope Reyes, Nora tested the name. I love it. One by one, the children were allowed in to meet their new sister. Even Levi, now 4 years old and no longer the baby of the family, was gentle and reverent as he peered at the tiny face. "She's so small," he breathed. "Was I ever that small?" "You were," Nora assured him, "and just like Hope, you were very loved." "Are we a real family now?" Samuel asked, his 8-year-old face serious. Colton gathered all the children close, careful not to jostle Nora or the baby. "We've been a real family since the day you arrived at Copper Ridge. But yes, son, we're a family, complete and forever." As Nora looked around at the faces surrounding her, Colton's weathered and kind, Eva's wise beyond her years, James's bright with joy, the twins identical and sweet, Samuel's earnest, Levi's curious, and baby Hope's perfect and new, she felt a peace settle over her soul. This was home. This was family. This was love. Not the broken, uncertain thing she'd had with Thomas, but something solid and true and lasting. Something built on choice and commitment and the daily decision to show up for each other. The first winter with Hope was challenging. Sleepless nights and constant feedings tested everyone's patience. But they managed it together, the older children taking turns helping with the baby, Colton waking with Nora for nighttime feedings, the whole household adjusting to accommodate their newest member. By the time spring arrived again, a full year since Nora and Colton had married, the family had found its rhythm. The children were thriving, the ranch was prosperous, and Nora had never been happier. One warm April morning, she stood on the porch watching Colton work with James and the horses while Eva read to the younger children under a tree. Hope was asleep in her arms, peaceful and content. The scene before her was so perfectly domestic, so beautifully ordinary, that it made her throat tight. "Mama?" Eva looked up from her book. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how lucky I am, how lucky we all are." "We're not lucky," Eva said with 10-year-old certainty. "We're blessed. There's a difference." "You're right, sweetheart. We're blessed." And they were. Blessed by second chances and new beginnings. Blessed by a man who'd chosen to love them when he didn't have to. Blessed by a home that had opened its doors and become their sanctuary. Nora thought sometimes about Thomas, wondered if he'd ever found whatever he'd been searching for when he left. She hoped he had. She bore him no ill will anymore, only a distant sadness for what might have been if he'd been a different man. But mostly, she didn't think about him at all. The past was the past, and her present was too full of joy to waste time on what had been. As the years passed, the Reyes family grew and changed. James became a skilled rancher, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day operations alongside his father. Eva became a teacher, educating not just her siblings but children from neighboring ranches. The twins developed a talent for healing and helped the local doctor with his rounds. Samuel discovered a gift for music and filled the house with songs. Levi grew into a charming, mischievous boy who kept everyone on their toes. And Hope, their bright, beautiful Hope, became the heart of the family, loved by all and spoiled by everyone. More children followed Hope. 2 boys who arrived in quick succession, filling the house with even more noise and laughter. The ranch expanded, prospered, became known throughout Montana as a place of hospitality and hard work. But through all the changes, one thing remained constant: the love between Colton and Nora. It deepened with each passing year, weathering challenges and celebrating victories, growing stronger through shared joys and shared sorrows. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Colton took Nora to the meadow where he'd first asked her to be his wife. It was spring again, the wildflowers in full bloom, the world alive with possibility. "Do you remember what I said to you here?" he asked, holding both her hands. "You asked me to let you be their father, to let you be my husband. And you said yes. Best decision of my life was asking. Best decision of yours was saying yes." Nora smiled, touching his face with gentle fingers. "No regrets?" "Not a single one. You?" She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the fear and pain, the uncertainty and struggle. She thought about the woman she'd been, broken and frightened and convinced she was worthless. And she thought about the woman she'd become, strong and loved and surrounded by family. "No regrets?" she said firmly. "Only gratitude." "For what?" "For you, for this life, for second chances." She paused. "And for Thomas Allen, actually." Colton raised his eyebrows. "That's unexpected." He taught me what love isn't. You taught me what love is. Both lessons were necessary. That's very generous of you. It's true. If he hadn't left, I never would have found you. My children never would have known what it means to have a real father. We never would have built this beautiful life together. So yes, in a strange way, I'm grateful to him for getting out of the way. Colton pulled her close, and they stood together in the meadow, surrounded by wildflowers and spring sunshine, and Nora felt the rightness of everything settle into her bones. This was where she was meant to be. This was the life she was meant to live. And this man, this patient, loving, steadfast man, was who she was meant to love. I love you, she whispered against his chest. I love you too. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that. And as they walked back to the ranch hand in hand, back to the house full of children and laughter and life, Nora knew with absolute certainty that she was home. Not just the physical place, though Copper Ridge would always be dear to her heart, but home in the truest sense, a place of belonging, of love, of being exactly where she was meant to be. Her husband had left her with 6 children, believing she would fail. A cowboy had said, "Let me be their father," and changed everything. And together, they'd built a life more beautiful than anything Nora had ever dared to dream. A life of hope, a life of love, a life of second chances seized and cherished, a life, quite simply, worth living.